Welcome back to this quiet corner of the internet, where wonder meets wisdom and the biggest mysteries unfold like gentle conversations. Today we're diving into something that might make you pause and look around differently, something that connects the dots between ancient whispers and modern questions. What if everything you know about how humans got here is only half the story? What if we didn't simply stumble into existence through a cosmic lottery of biology and chemistry, but were deliberately positioned on this spinning rock we call home? This isn't just another tale about evolution or creation. This is about the nagging feeling that has haunted our species since we first gazed upward and wondered why we're here. Whether wrapped in ancient legends, spiritual beliefs, theories about visitors from distant worlds, or those quiet moments when you stare at the night sky and sense something more, this question refuses to fade away. Could it be that our presence here isn't random at all, but the result of intention, planning, maybe even care? I want you to do something for me right now. Take a moment to notice exactly where you are. Are you curled up somewhere comfortable, letting your mind wander before sleep finds you? Walking through your neighborhood with the world humming softly in your ears? Stealing a few minutes of mental escape during a busy day? Your exact location right now matters, because we're about to explore the ultimate question of location itself. The room you're in, the time on your clock, the feeling in your chest as you listen. All of these details anchor you to this moment and this mystery. If you're finding yourself drawn into this exploration, if it feels like the kind of conversation you want to continue, I'd love it if you could hit that like button or subscribe. It helps these ideas reach other curious minds who might be ready to step away from the rush of daily life and into something deeper. Picture yourself stepping outside right now, under a sky full of stars, those distant lights scattered across the darkness, our moon casting its gentle silver glow over everything below. Standing there in that stillness, certain questions become impossible to ignore. How did all of this begin? Why does it exist here, now, with us as witnesses? The possibility that we might have been intentionally placed here creates a strange mix of emotions. There's something deeply comforting about the idea that we're not just a cosmic fluke, that maybe our existence serves some greater purpose. Yet that same thought can feel unsettling, because if someone or something put us here, then who were they? What did they want? And what does that mean for us now? Rather than rushing toward conclusions, let's meander through the clues, the ancient stories, the scientific theories, and the wild possibilities that emerge when we really dig into this question. Let's trace each pathway and pay attention to what feelings arise as we explore them together. This isn't the kind of thought you can examine once and set aside. It's the type of idea that follows you home, whispering in quiet moments when you're brewing coffee, or standing in line or lying in bed scrolling through your phone. What if we were intentionally placed here? Those 6 words seem straightforward, but they crack open into an endless maze of wonder. Placed by who exactly? For what reason? At what point in time? The deeper you dig, the more questions multiply, until you're holding something far more complex than where you started. Most of us begin from the same foundation. We exist, we're alive on this planet called Earth, and it supports our existence with such precision that it occasionally feels almost supernatural. When you start cataloging all the tiny factors that make our survival possible, it reads like someone's perfectly crafted blueprint. Our lungs work because oxygen sits at exactly the right concentration in the air. We have an atmosphere thick enough to protect us from cosmic dangers, yet transparent enough to let sunlight nourish us. A magnetic bubble surrounds our world, deflecting radiation that would otherwise cook us. Liquid water flows everywhere across the surface. Our sun burns with reliable consistency, neither too hot nor too cold. Even our moon plays its part, controlling ocean tides and keeping Earth's rotation stable. Any single one of these factors is remarkable, but all of them working together creates something almost impossibly rare. Scientists often respond to this observation with a logical point. They remind us that we only notice these perfect conditions because we're here to observe them. If Earth weren't suitable for life, we wouldn't exist to comment on how suitable it is. This reasoning, known as the anthropic principle, suggests our perspective is naturally biased toward survival. But even accepting that logic, the nagging feeling persists. Could all these intricate details really be nothing more than cosmic luck? Or might there be a chance, however remote, that someone orchestrated our placement here with careful intention? When this idea first reaches people's ears, reactions usually fall into 2 distinct groups. The first group dismisses it entirely, saying we evolved here gradually through well-understood natural mechanisms, and imagining anything else is just wishful thinking. The second group pauses and wonders if maybe the complete story involves more than slow evolution and random chance. Both reactions make perfect sense, and both leave space for genuine curiosity. Let's explore that second perspective for a while. Imagine, just as a mental exercise, that we really were deliberately positioned here. What might that actually mean? One scenario involves some advanced intelligence, whether divine, extraterrestrial, or even future versions of ourselves, choosing Earth as our designated home and making it happen. Another possibility suggests that life's essential ingredients traveled through space on meteors or comets, finding Earth and taking root here, making our origins less accidental and more like intentional seeding. Then there's perhaps the most unsettling option of all, that we were placed here, without any explanation of why, left to wonder about our purpose for eternity. To understand this mystery better, we can examine the peculiarities of our own species. Humans stand out dramatically from other animals on this planet. We move upright on two legs, leaving our hands free to create and manipulate tools. Our brains demand enormous amounts of energy, burning through roughly 20% of all the calories we consume, which represents a massive evolutionary gamble. Our intelligence lets us reshape our environment on a scale no other creature even approaches. And our consciousness, our ability not just to survive but to contemplate our own survival, to think about our thinking process itself, remains one of biology's greatest mysteries. If gradual evolution explains everything about us, why did these changes happen so rapidly and so dramatically in humans while passing by other species entirely? Why didn't dolphins, with their impressive brains, build underwater cities? Why didn't elephants, with their complex social bonds, develop written language? What caused humans to suddenly leap forward, creating art, music, farming, and technology in what amounts to an evolutionary heartbeat? This is where the idea of intentional placement starts feeling less like pure imagination and more like a reasonable attempt to explain genuine puzzles. Maybe something gave us a push. Maybe some force accelerated our development beyond natural rates. Maybe intelligence itself was deliberately planted within us, like a seed waiting for the right moment to grow. Ancient stories from around the world overflow with exactly this suggestion. Nearly every culture preserves tales of beings who arrived from the heavens or from beyond our world, bringing knowledge, tools, or life itself to humanity. The Sumerians described gods who came down from the sky to shape human civilization. The Maya spoke of visitors who shared profound wisdom. The Egyptians told stories of deities who taught them farming, writing, and building techniques. Even in traditions closer to our own time, we find echoes of being created and placed in specially prepared environments, whether paradise gardens or sacred territories. These stories don't qualify as scientific proof, but they reveal something profound about human imagination. Across different eras and continents, people have consistently leaned toward the idea that we were intentionally placed, rather than accidentally stumbled into existence. Perhaps this pattern exists, because being placed gives our lives meaning and direction. If someone or something positioned us here deliberately, then our existence must serve some purpose. And if there's a purpose, then our presence matters in ways that pure accident can never quite provide. Science naturally demands careful skepticism. Extraordinary theories require extraordinary proof. So far, fossil evidence and genetic research continue pointing toward natural evolution as the foundation of our species. But even within that established framework, puzzles remain unsolved. Why the sudden expansion of cognitive abilities? Why the explosive emergence of symbolic thinking? Why the rapid development of complex civilizations? These gaps create fertile ground for speculation, and speculation often circles back to the same persistent question: what if we were intentionally placed here? Consider this from yet another angle. Picture future humans living thousands or millions of years beyond our current moment. If they mastered time travel or developed technologies we can't even imagine today, could they reach backward to seed their own beginnings? Could they place early humans in the past, carefully shaping their own history from the future? It sounds like pure science fiction, and maybe it is, but it also shows how the question of placement doesn't necessarily require gods or aliens. Sometimes the ones doing the placing might be ourselves, working backward through time to guarantee our own existence. Then there's the extraterrestrial angle to consider. Astronomers constantly remind us that the universe stretches beyond imagination. Billions upon billions of stars, countless planets, endless opportunities for life to emerge and flourish. If advanced civilizations exist elsewhere in this vast cosmos, wondering whether they might experiment, explore, or cultivate life on distant worlds isn't unreasonable at all. If you possessed the ability to plant intelligence on a promising planet, wouldn't you be tempted to try? And if you did, how would the beings you created ever discover they were part of a grand experiment? The disturbing aspect of this possibility isn't just whether it might be true, but what it suggests about our purpose and autonomy. If we were placed here, then our existence connects to someone else's agenda. Maybe their intentions were kind and protective. Maybe they were completely indifferent to our welfare. Maybe our presence here was purely accidental on their part. We might be caretakers of something precious, subjects in an ongoing test, or simply pieces in a much larger pattern we're not equipped to perceive yet. Naturally, we lack definitive answers to any of these questions. All we possess are hints, ancient stories, and the persistent itch of curiosity itself. But maybe that's sufficient for now. Maybe the real value of this question lies not in solving it completely, but in living with it, noticing how it transforms our perspective on everything around us. When you consider yourself as intentionally placed here, even just hypothetically, the entire world shifts into a different focus. The forests, oceans, and sky stop feeling like mere background scenery and start resembling a carefully designed stage. Your daily life feels less like meaningless noise and more like dialogue in an unfolding story. Whether or not we were truly placed here by design, the question itself changes us. It invites us to think about meaning, responsibility, and possibility in ways that pure randomness simply cannot offer. Perhaps this explains why humans return to this question repeatedly, generation after generation, culture after culture. As we continue deeper into this exploration, carry the question with you, not as something demanding a quick answer, but as a special lens for examining evidence, myths, and scientific discoveries. What if we were intentionally placed here, not merely a puzzle to solve, but a completely different way of seeing ourselves, our planet, and our role in the vast universe? When you examine Earth closely, it becomes difficult to ignore how perfectly it accommodates our needs. We breathe effortlessly, drink from its waterways, cultivate food in its soil, and move comfortably across its surface. The more details you compile, the more this planet starts resembling less of a random space rock, and more of a thoughtfully prepared dwelling. Oxygen maintains a steady concentration around 21%, creating a precise balance that fuels our metabolism without burning us from the inside out. Our atmosphere filters solar radiation, delivering life-giving light while blocking deadly energy. The magnetic field surrounding us deflects solar storms that would otherwise strip away our protective air. Water blankets most of the surface in exactly the right proportions, not so scarce that we'd perish from thirst, not so abundant that we'd drown completely, but perfectly distributed to create oceans, rivers, lakes, and rainfall. From a scientific standpoint, all these conditions emerge from natural processes that we understand quite well. Earth orbits within what scientists call the habitable zone around our Sun, positioned neither too close nor too distant for liquid water to exist. Its mass is sufficient to maintain an atmosphere. Its molten core generates the magnetic shield that protects us. Its tilted axis creates seasonal changes that support diverse ecosystems. Every condition has a physical explanation, and together they create what appears miraculous but actually represents the predictable outcome of physics and chemistry. Yet, when you pull back from the mechanical details, something still feels almost supernatural about it all. Why here, of all places? Why this particular planet? Why such an ideal match for our needs? If you contrast Earth with its planetary neighbors, the differences become even more striking. Mars, despite showing some promise for past or present life, remains cold, arid, and wrapped in only the thinnest whisper of atmosphere. Venus, our other neighboring world, exists as a greenhouse horror story, with surface temperatures hot enough to melt metal. Mercury bakes on its sun-facing side, while freezing on the dark half, and the distant giants are nothing but swirling gases with no solid ground to stand on. Even the more promising moons like Europa or Titan would kill us instantly without sophisticated life support systems. Earth stands completely alone, a singular treasure in our cosmic neighborhood. When astronomers hunt for life beyond our solar system, they specifically search for Earth-like worlds because our planet serves as the perfect example, the ultimate standard. But that description itself reveals something fascinating. We're not simply existing on any random world, we're thriving on the one that appears uniquely crafted to support us. Maybe it's worth wondering why the match is so incredibly precise. One explanation suggests we evolved here, gradually molded by our environment across millions of years. Our respiratory systems work with this atmosphere, because this atmosphere shaped them over time. Our bodies process these foods, because this soil nurtured them through countless generations. We're perfectly tuned to Earth, because Earth served as our evolutionary instrument. But this reasoning doesn't entirely satisfy the deeper curiosity. If the universe overflows with rocks, dust, and burning stars, why did a world like this form anywhere at all? Why did conditions align so precisely here, while remaining hostile virtually everywhere else? Some philosophers argue, it's simply a matter of probability. With countless galaxies containing billions of stars each, the mathematical odds guarantee that somewhere a planet will develop just the right conditions for life. We simply happen to inhabit one of these rare worlds, which explains why we're here to appreciate it. That's the straightforward mathematical answer. But for many people, it feels like avoiding the real question. Statistics might explain existence itself, but they don't address the feeling that this planet isn't just livable, but almost impossibly perfect for our specific needs. Consider our sun for a moment. It burns with remarkable stability, avoiding the violent radiation bursts that would sterilize any nearby planets. It generates energy at exactly the right rate, enough to nurture life without destroying it. It possesses the ideal size, age, and distance from us. Even our quiet moon plays a role that seems remarkably convenient. It keeps Earth's rotation stable, preventing dramatic climate swings that would make life nearly impossible. It controls ocean tides, which may have been crucial for the earliest chemistry of life. Without our lunar companion, Earth might wobble chaotically, creating a far less hospitable environment. The mystery deepens when you examine how life itself interacts with our planet. Plants release oxygen that animals need to survive. Animals exhale carbon dioxide that plants require for growth. Oceans absorb and distribute heat, maintaining stable climates across the globe. Forests hold soil in place, generate rainfall, and create complex ecosystems. The entire system connects and balances itself, almost as though Earth and life were designed together as one integrated whole. Scientists call this the Gaia hypothesis, proposing that life and the planet function as a single self-regulating organism. This doesn't suggest the planet possesses consciousness, but it does mean Earth behaves as though it were alive, constantly adjusting conditions to maintain balance. If you attribute this to chance alone, it's already remarkable beyond words. If you lean toward the possibility of intentional placement, it starts feeling like genuine evidence. Perhaps Earth wasn't simply the fortunate winner in a cosmic lottery. Maybe it was selected, prepared, or fine-tuned specifically for us to call home. Ancient wisdom traditions often capture this sense of perfect harmony. Many indigenous cultures describe Earth not as a resource to exploit, but as a generous gift, a nurturing mother, or a careful guardian. The land offers sustenance, the sky provides water, the seasons bring renewal. These stories carry the deep intuition that humanity and the planet belong together, that we fit here not through accident, but through purposeful design. Modern science, maintaining its careful objectivity, avoids using words like intention or purpose. Yet even researchers sometimes slip into language that sounds more poetic than purely mechanical. They describe Earth as delicate, balanced, extraordinary. They use phrases like perfectly calibrated and remarkably fine-tuned. It becomes almost impossible to avoid such language, because the deeper you study our planet, the more it resembles a miracle, even when you explain every detail through physics and chemistry. Now imagine observing Earth through completely alien perspective. If some advanced civilization from across the galaxy scanned our solar system, one planet would immediately capture their attention. It shimmers blue with vast oceans, gleams white with swirling clouds, glows green with thriving forests. Its atmosphere reveals abundant oxygen, an unmistakable signature of life. If these beings were cosmic gardeners searching for the perfect place to cultivate a new species, this would be the obvious selection. Maybe that's exactly why this question refuses to disappear. If you wanted to position humanity somewhere in the universe, wouldn't you select this planet? If you hoped for life to flourish magnificently, wouldn't you choose the world that already resembles paradise compared to all its neighbors? This doesn't constitute proof, naturally. It's contemplation, speculation, wonder, but it helps explain why the idea that Earth suits us almost too perfectly has captivated human imagination for so long. Whether approached through scientific analysis or mythological storytelling, humans consistently return to the same profound realization: we genuinely feel like we belong here, and that sense of belonging carries tremendous power. When we see ourselves as intentionally placed, Earth transforms from mere backdrop into a stage deliberately prepared for our story. Every forest, every ocean, every sunrise appears less like coincidence and more like invitation. Whether or not this reflects cosmic truth, it fundamentally changes how we move through our daily lives. It makes us more gentle, more aware, more responsible. Because if Earth accommodates us so perfectly, perhaps it's worth asking how well we're accommodating Earth in return. That might be the real thread connecting all these observations. Our planet suits us so beautifully that we sometimes forget to pay attention. We walk across it, drink from it, breathe it constantly, and assume it will always provide for us. But if we consider even briefly that we were intentionally placed here, then this perfect fit becomes a profound reminder. We were given a world that sustains every aspect of our existence. The question that naturally follows is both simple and challenging. What will we do with such an extraordinary gift? The thought of being placed doesn't necessarily require invisible overseers, cosmic experiments, or elaborate grand designs. Sometimes it simply means looking at Earth with fresh eyes and recognizing just how extraordinary it truly is. Once you perceive it that way, you can never quite see it the same again. When most people imagine human origins, they picture that familiar diagram from old textbooks showing the gradual progression from ape-like ancestors to upright modern humans. It creates a tidy visual narrative, but it's also deeply misleading. The actual story resembles less of a straight line and more of a complicated tree with countless branches, evolutionary dead ends, surprising overlaps, and sudden leaps that remain completely mysterious. When you examine the details closely, the tale of how humans emerged becomes far less clear than most people assume. And within those unexplained gaps, the question of intentional placement quietly finds room to grow. Fossil evidence reveals that life on Earth has been evolving for billions of years, moving from simple single cells to complex organisms, from fish to land animals, from reptiles to mammals. Eventually, among the primates, one group began walking upright, crafting tools, and developing larger brains. These ancestors weren't yet recognizably human, but they were moving in our direction. They hunted, gathered food, and managed to survive in challenging environments. Then, something remarkable and puzzling occurred. Archaeologists refer to it as the Great Leap Forward. Within a relatively brief time period, humans transformed from basic survival-focused creatures into beings capable of sophisticated culture. Cave paintings suddenly appeared, filled with vivid depictions of animals and enigmatic symbols. Tools became not just functional but sometimes beautiful, sharing aesthetic sensibility alongside practical skill. Burial sites suggest the development of rituals and possibly even beliefs about existence after death. Complex language likely emerged during this period, enabling knowledge to spread, stories to develop, and communities to grow far beyond simple survival instincts. What continues to puzzle researchers is the incredible speed of this transformation. For hundreds of thousands of years, tool-making techniques remained virtually unchanged. Stone fragments, basic hand axes, the fundamental implements of survival. Then almost overnight in evolutionary terms, art, music, symbolic thinking, and sophisticated structures appeared across human cultures. Why did creativity and intelligence suddenly explode in this way? Was it simply a matter of brain size reaching some critical threshold? Or did something else entirely contribute to this leap? Genetic research adds another layer to the mystery. The human genome contains traces of unusual modifications that distinguish us from our closest evolutionary relatives. Small genetic adjustments affecting brain development, speech capabilities, and social behaviors. Some researchers observe that these changes appear clustered together, as though several crucial upgrades arrived simultaneously, rather than gradually over time. Evolution typically operates slowly, building changes across many generations. Why then did so many defining human characteristics emerge so rapidly and apparently all at once? Comparisons with our nearest evolutionary cousins make the puzzle even more intriguing. Chimpanzees share more than 98% of our genetic material, yet that tiny difference creates an enormous gulf in capability. Chimps use basic tools but never construct cities. They communicate through gestures and sounds, but never develop sophisticated languages. They form social groups but never create philosophy, mathematics, or advanced technology. If evolution works gradually, why does such a minuscule genetic difference produce such a massive gap in intelligence and capability? This unexplained divide has prompted some researchers to wonder whether something unusual intervened in human development. Did our species receive some kind of assistance, enhancement, or addition from an external source? Some theorists point to ancient stories from around the world, which frequently describe gods or beings from the sky directly shaping humanity. Sumerian tales tell of humans being created by divine figures who blend heavenly essence with earthly materials. Greek mythology features Prometheus bringing fire, representing knowledge to humanity, despite divine opposition. Countless other traditions describe people being literally crafted by higher beings who then provide language, agriculture, and social systems. Whether you interpret these as historical accounts, symbolic narratives, or cultural memories, they consistently emphasize the same concept. Humanity didn't simply evolve naturally. Humanity received something special, was placed deliberately, shaped intentionally, or guided in ways that set us distinctly apart from every other form of life on Earth. Archaeological discoveries also contain puzzling elements that fuel continued speculation. Sites like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, constructed over 11,000 years ago, display monumental architecture built far earlier than conventional timelines would predict. According to traditional understanding, humans at that period should have been simple hunter-gatherers lacking the organization, knowledge, or technology necessary to construct such impressive structures. Yet, there it exists. Enormous stones positioned with remarkable accuracy, decorated with intricate carvings. How did ancient peoples accomplish this feat, and why so unexpectedly early in human development? Similar mysteries emerge with ancient maps showing geographical knowledge that shouldn't have existed, legends of vanished civilizations, and the sudden emergence of sophisticated understanding in regions like Mesopotamia and Egypt. Sometimes human progress appears less like a gradual ascent and more like unexpected bursts of advancement that arrived ahead of their predicted timeline. Skeptics maintain that humans possess far more ingenuity than we typically acknowledge, and that lost knowledge can be independently rediscovered across different cultures and time periods. But for those willing to consider alternative explanations, these historical anomalies suggest that perhaps humanity received assistance, instruction, or even intentional placement from external sources. Even human language presents a fascinating puzzle. Our ability to communicate complex concepts, transmit abstract thoughts, and describe things completely absent from our immediate environment seems to have emerged fully developed. No examples of primitive half-languages exist in the historical record. Wherever archaeologists discover human settlements, they find rich, sophisticated communication systems already in place. It appears that once this capacity arrived, it did so completely and immediately. This sudden completeness raises important questions. Was language a gradual invention, refined over countless generations, or was it something that sparked suddenly, whether through biological changes, cultural breakthroughs, or external influence? Then, there's the mystery of consciousness itself. We possess not only awareness of our surrounding world, but awareness of ourselves existing within it. We can reflect on our thoughts, question our purpose, contemplate questions exactly like this one. Scientists continue debating where consciousness originates. Neural networks fire electrical signals, chemical messages travel between brain cells, and somehow the subjective experience of being human emerges from this biological machinery. But why does this happen at all? Why would basic survival require not just recognition of threats and food sources, but also awareness of mortality, meaning, and the infinite vastness of space? From an evolutionary standpoint, consciousness seems unnecessarily elaborate. From the perspective of intentional placement, it feels deliberately designed. If you wanted to create a species capable of questioning its role in the universe, you'd equip it with exactly what humans possess: intelligence, imagination, memory, and just enough mystery surrounding its origins to fuel endless searching. Naturally, we must proceed with caution. Throughout history, whenever we've encountered gaps in our knowledge, we've been tempted to insert external explanations. Past mysteries once attributed to divine intervention or alien visitation eventually found scientific answers. Thunder became understood through meteorology, diseases through biology, celestial movements through astrophysics. The puzzle of human origins might eventually be solved completely through fossil evidence and genetic research. But even if that happens, the question of why those natural processes unfolded as they did will persist. And that's precisely where the concept of intentional placement continues to find breathing room. Picture yourself observing the entire story of humanity from a cosmic vantage point, watching it unfold like time-lapse photography. You'd witness small groups wandering across ancient landscapes, gathering food, crafting basic tools. Then suddenly, artistic expression explodes across cave walls. Fires begin glowing in the darkness. Communities form, cities emerge, monuments rise toward the sky. Written language appears, Ships venture across vast oceans. Flying machines take to the air. Satellites orbit the planet. Within what amounts to an evolutionary instant, humanity completely transforms the world. Without prior knowledge, you might naturally assume some invisible force accelerated this entire process. That impression proves remarkably difficult to dismiss. Even when science provides explanations, the underlying feeling remains. The mystery of human origins extends beyond fossils and genetic sequences. It's about understanding why we stand so distinctly apart from every other species, why our developmental story feels so unusual, why our minds seem calibrated not merely for survival, but for wonder itself. Perhaps that represents the genuine puzzle we're trying to solve. We are the one species that contemplates its own existence. Other animals survive, reproduce, and adapt to their environments. We accomplish all of that. But we also constantly ask why we're here. Maybe that questioning impulse itself marks us as intentionally placed. Maybe the very act of wondering provides the evidence we've been searching for all along. When discussing evolution, we typically imagine it as a slow, steady process, where tiny modifications accumulate across countless generations, small advantages building gradually until completely new forms eventually emerge. Often that's precisely how it operates. A fine's shape shifting across millions of years into wing bones, fur gradually thickening in response to colder climates, or eyesight slowly improving across different species. Evolution demands enormous patience, and when we examine fossil evidence, that patience is literally carved in stone. But here's where things become strange. Sometimes the geological record reveals not gradual steps but dramatic leaps, explosions of change that appear too rapid, too extensive, too coordinated to match evolution's typically quiet rhythm. The human story isn't the only place we encounter this phenomenon, but it represents one of the most dramatic examples. For millions of years, early human ancestors created simple stone tools that remained crude and functional, barely changing at all. Then within a remarkably short time span, tools became sophisticated, art flourished everywhere, music appeared, and complex culture spread rapidly. This kind of sudden leap makes scientists pause because evolution rarely moves with such bold, dramatic strokes. This pattern isn't unique to human development. Consider the Cambrian explosion, approximately 540 million years ago. For billions of years beforehand, life remained relatively simple, consisting mainly of single cells, and eventually small multicellular organisms, nothing particularly complex. Then within a relatively brief geological window, life diversified explosively. Animals with skeletons, protective shells, sophisticated eyes, and intricate body plans suddenly appear throughout the fossil record. Nearly every major animal group we recognize today traces its evolutionary roots back to that single burst of creativity. It resembles life jumping from sketching basic stick figures to creating masterpiece paintings virtually overnight. Scientists propose various explanations. Naturally, dramatic changes in atmospheric oxygen levels, crucial genetic innovations like the development of Hox genes that control body structure formation, ecological pressures that triggered rapid adaptive responses. But even with these scientific explanations, the Cambrian explosion's incredible speed feels genuinely unusual. If evolution resembles a lengthy novel, that particular chapter reads more like an unexpected plot twist than gradual character development. Human evolution contains smaller versions of these mysterious twists. One involves the sudden expansion in brain size. For millions of years, our ancestors' brains grew slowly, almost imperceptibly. Then, within a relatively compressed time span, brain volume doubled dramatically. Larger brains enabled enhanced intelligence, improved memory, and greater ability to manipulate environmental conditions. But they also demanded significantly more energy, created riskier childbirth situations, and produced more vulnerable infants. Why would natural selection make such a dangerous evolutionary gamble, and why so abruptly? Language represents another inexplicable leap forward. For ages, humans likely communicated through simple methods involving basic gestures and elementary sounds. Then suddenly, the capacity for sophisticated language emerged fully formed. Not just danger signals or food location indicators, but complex stories, detailed instructions, and beautiful songs. Language completely reshaped human existence. It enabled knowledge to transfer across generations, allowed inventions to accumulate over time, and permitted culture to flourish magnificently. Once again, this leap appears too rapid, as though someone inserted a key into the human brain and unlocked a door that had been patiently waiting. Agriculture follows this same mysterious pattern. Throughout most of human history, we lived as nomadic hunter-gatherers, moving seasonally and depending entirely on whatever the natural landscape provided. Then seemingly everywhere, simultaneously, agricultural knowledge appeared. People learned to plant seeds, cultivate crops, harvest food, and store surplus for future use. Villages formed around these agricultural centers, cities followed naturally, and civilization accelerated dramatically. The timeline remains remarkably compressed compared to the vast sweep of human prehistory, yet the transformation proved enormous. Some researchers suggest these leaps simply reflect evolution's true nature, consisting of long periods of stability interrupted by sudden bursts of change, a concept scientists call punctuated equilibrium. In this model, evolution doesn't resemble a smooth upward climb, but rather a staircase with flat stretches followed by sudden dramatic rises. It's a useful theoretical framework, but it doesn't entirely eliminate the underlying sense of mystery. Why do these bursts occur precisely when they do, and why do they prove so remarkably dramatic? Others speculate that these leaps hint at something more profound. Perhaps external forces, whether cosmic, extraterrestrial, or even intentional, played significant roles. If life was originally seeded from space, as the panspermia theory suggests, maybe each evolutionary leap represents a fresh infusion, a new upgrade to existing biological systems. If advanced civilizations exist elsewhere, perhaps they occasionally nudge certain species along their developmental paths, planting new ideas, modifying genetics, or subtly guiding progress. If we were indeed placed here intentionally, then sudden leaps could represent the signature of that placement, moments when natural timelines were deliberately accelerated through design. Ancient mythologies echo this possibility remarkably well. Many describe humans receiving knowledge or sophisticated tools from beings originating beyond our world. Fire from Prometheus, agricultural techniques from divine messengers, written language from gods of wisdom. These stories consistently feature sudden gifts rather than gradual discoveries. The mythological accounts align strangely well with the actual leaps documented in historical evidence. Skeptics argue this simply reflects human storytelling tendencies, claiming we naturally prefer dramatic narratives and therefore transform gradual processes into sudden events in our collective memory. But archaeological evidence continues revealing genuinely abrupt changes. Göbekli Tepe, rising before agriculture supposedly existed, pyramids appearing with mathematical precision that seems ahead of their time, sudden cultural explosions that leave researchers wondering what originally sparked them. Genetic research adds yet another intriguing layer to this mystery. Scientists studying the human genome have discovered regions that appear unusual, modifications that seem both too recent and too perfectly coordinated to match typical evolutionary patterns. Some researchers have even suggested the possibility of ancient genetic engineering in our species' past, though such ideas remain highly controversial within mainstream scientific circles. Still, the fact that these suggestions arise at all demonstrates how genuinely puzzling these evolutionary leaps can be. The broader question becomes why life itself seems compelled to leap forward so dramatically. If the universe operates with complete indifference, why should intelligence, consciousness, or sophisticated culture emerge anywhere at all? Basic survival doesn't require philosophical thinking. Successful reproduction doesn't demand musical creativity. Environmental adaptation doesn't necessitate mathematical understanding. Yet humans produce all these things naturally, and we do so with an internal drive that extends far beyond mere survival instincts. These leaps encompass not just physical developments, but mental and spiritual transformations as well. They raise profound questions about purpose, direction, and perhaps even intentional placement. Imagine once again that you're observing Earth from a cosmic perspective through time-lapse photography. For millions of years you'd witness slow shifts as animals live, die, and gradually evolve. Then sudden bursts appear, explosions of complexity, leaps of intelligence, entire civilizations rising almost instantaneously. The whole process would appear less like random development, and more like a carefully orchestrated series of interventions. Whether those interventions were purely natural, environmentally driven, or intentionally guided remains the central mystery. Some scientists propose that the universe itself naturally favors increasing complexity, suggesting that once life begins anywhere, it becomes naturally drawn toward intelligence, as though complexity represents a fundamental law rather than mere accident. If this theory proves correct, then sudden evolutionary leaps don't indicate external placement, but simply reflect life's natural rhythm and progression. But other researchers remain skeptical. pointing out how remarkably rare intelligence appears to be throughout the observable universe. If increasing complexity represents an inevitable universal law, where are all the other advanced civilizations we should be encountering? Why does the cosmos feel so eerily silent and empty around us? This question continues to hover persistently. Are sudden evolutionary leaps simply nature's way of catching us off guard with unexpected developments? Or do they represent evidence that something else entirely is influencing the process? Perhaps both possibilities contain truth. Perhaps natural forces and intentional placement aren't opposing concepts, but interconnected parts of the same vast story. What remains undeniable is that these dramatic leaps fundamentally shaped who we became. Without them, we wouldn't exist as we do today. Without sudden bursts of transformative change, we might still be crafting primitive stone implements, wandering ancient grasslands, completely unaware of the stellar tapestry spread above us. Instead, we construct towering cities, launch satellites into orbit, and pose profound questions about our own beginnings. These leaps delivered us to this moment, whether through random chance, evolutionary necessity, or purposeful intention. As we contemplate these patterns, it becomes clear why the concept of intentional placement feels so compelling to human imagination. When historical development moves in sudden dramatic jumps rather than gradual progression, it resembles deliberate design more than accidental occurrence. Whether that design emerges from natural forces, from the universe's inherent properties, or from intelligence beyond our understanding, we may never definitively know, but the persistent feeling remains strong and unwavering. Something about our species' story stands out as genuinely unusual. Something about our evolutionary leaps suggests that humanity's journey isn't merely random, but truly remarkable. Throughout every region of the world, wherever humans have established communities, stories about the sky have emerged and persisted. Some describe it as the dwelling place of divine beings, others as the ancestral homeland, still others as the source of wisdom, fire, or moral law. It's remarkable how consistently the sky appears as a realm from which something or someone descends to fundamentally shape life on Earth. When we listen carefully to these ancient narratives, they sound less like pure entertainment and more like fragmented memories, retold and gradually reshaped across countless generations. The Sumerians, representing one of humanity's earliest known civilizations, spoke extensively of the Anunnaki, mysterious beings who arrived from the heavens above. According to their detailed accounts, these figures played crucial roles in creating and guiding human development, even teaching agricultural techniques and governmental systems. Ancient clay tablets describe rulers claiming direct descent from these sky beings, as though their political authority derived not merely from earthly power, but from cosmic connection. Skeptics naturally dismiss these accounts as pure mythology, products of primitive imagination, but the extraordinary detail with which Sumerians described their celestial visitors continues fueling curiosity and speculation. In ancient Egypt, deities like Thoth and Osiris were credited with bringing knowledge, social order, and civilized culture to humanity. The pyramids themselves are frequently interpreted as monuments aligned not simply with earthly considerations, but with specific celestial patterns and stellar configurations. The internal shafts within the Great Pyramid point directly toward particular stars, suggesting the builders wanted to establish concrete connections with realms beyond Earth. Whether symbolic or literal in intention, the underlying message remains crystal clear. The sky wasn't merely something above them, but central to their understanding of origin and ultimate purpose. Greek mythology presents the figure of Prometheus, who steals fire from the gods and bestows it upon humanity. Fire in this context represents not only literal flame, but serves as a powerful metaphor for knowledge, creativity, and technological advancement. The story explicitly suggests that humanity's great leap forward wasn't entirely our own achievement. Something from above, something transcendent, placed that transformative spark directly into our hands. Examining cultures across the Americas reveals strikingly similar themes throughout their mythological traditions. The Maya described gods who descended from the sky to create humans, initially from mud, then from wood, and finally from maize. Their sacred texts document cycles of creation involving trial and error, as though beings from above were conducting experiments, making adjustments until they successfully produced humans as we exist today. In Inca mythology, Viracocha emerges from the sea but ascends toward the sky, carrying with him the precious gifts of civilization and culture. Many native North American traditions speak of sky beings or star people, figures who arrive from celestial realms to teach, heal, or provide guidance to human communities. In West Africa, the Dogon people preserve stories of beings originating from the star Sirius, possessing detailed astronomical knowledge that long predated modern scientific confirmation that Sirius actually consists of a binary star system. The remarkable precision and depth within their traditional accounts has sparked endless scholarly debate. Did they simply observe the night sky with extraordinary care and insight, or did they preserve knowledge originally given to them from external sources? Polynesian myths describe gods and ancestors descending from the heavens aboard canoes that crossed not only earthly seas but celestial skies as well. Hindu traditions document in the Vedas descriptions of Vimanas, flying chariots belonging to divine beings, detailed with surprisingly technical language for vehicles capable of ascending and descending at will. Whether these represented symbolic interpretations of clouds and storms or something more concrete and physical, the fundamental pattern persists. The sky consistently served as the realm from which transformative power and knowledge arrived. Even within Abrahamic traditions, this recurring theme continues. Genesis opens with a God who creates and deliberately places humans into a prepared garden, shaping them from earthly dust while breathing life into them from above. Angels descend from heavenly realms, delivering messages, providing guidance, and sometimes bearing warnings. The central imagery remains consistent throughout. What exists higher, beyond the clouds, represents the ultimate source of what we are and what we become. Anthropologists frequently explain these mythological patterns as psychological projections. Ancient peoples looked upward at the sky, witnessed storms, lightning and stars, and naturally assumed that power and authority resided in those heights. To them, the heavens represented a realm of profound mystery and overwhelming majesty, so they logically located their deities above earthly concerns. But there's another way to interpret these persistent stories. If we were indeed intentionally placed here, wouldn't our earliest ancestors have remembered it as a descent from the sky? If visitors actually arrived, wouldn't they naturally be described as beings originating from the heavens? It becomes tempting to dismiss myths as pure metaphor, but the remarkable repetition across completely separate cultures deserves serious consideration. Independent societies, isolated by vast oceans and mountain ranges, consistently developed stories echoing identical patterns. Beings from above, bringing essential knowledge, actively shaping life, leaving behind impressive structures, valuable teachings, or genetic bloodlines. This consistency suggests either a universal aspect of human imagination, or a shared collective memory of something genuinely real. Consider how myths naturally transmit across generations. They aren't scientific papers complete with footnotes and supporting data. They exist as stories told around fires, sung during ceremonies, carved into stone surfaces, painted on cave walls. Each retelling inevitably distorts details slightly, gradually reshaping specifics while preserving the essential core. Across thousands of years, the memory of extraordinary events can transform into legend. Legends can evolve into myths, and myths can develop into organized religions. If something truly extraordinary occurred in humanity's distant past, if we were actually placed here or guided by visitors from elsewhere, wouldn't we expect to find it preserved in exactly this fragmented, mythological form? There's also the intriguing question surrounding ancient monuments and their construction. Many archaeological sites display precise alignments with stellar configurations in ways that suggest deliberate connection to celestial realms. Stonehenge in England aligns perfectly with solstices. The pyramids of Giza correspond directly with Orion's belt constellation. South American structures point towards solstices and equinoxes with mathematical precision. Why would early humans, struggling merely to survive in harsh environments, invest enormous effort aligning massive stones with distant stars? Perhaps it reflected spiritual reverence. Perhaps it preserved important memories. Perhaps they received specific instructions to do so. The deeper you examine these patterns, the more ancient myths blur into genuine historical mysteries. Flying chariots, gods descending from above, star messengers, entire civilizations receiving agricultural and writing instruction from figures originating in the heavens. From our modern perspective, some descriptions sound remarkably similar to advanced technology. Beings arriving from the sky in brilliant craft, voices resonating from the heavens, gifts of fire, knowledge, and transformative power. It becomes tempting to translate these ancient accounts into contemporary terms involving spaceships, radio transmissions, and sophisticated science. Whether such interpretations prove fair or accurate, they reflect how much these ancient stories continue sparking genuine curiosity and speculation. Skeptics correctly point out that humans naturally create patterns and invent explanatory stories for lightning, floods, comets, and eclipses. We anthropomorphize unknown forces, transforming natural phenomena into personality-driven narratives. This observation contains undeniable truth. Myths definitely aren't scientific records or historical documents. But skeptics also acknowledge that myths frequently preserve kernels of actual history. Flood stories remembered as global myths may reflect genuine ancient disasters. Battles between gods may echo real wars involving powerful rulers. If that's accurate, then myths describing beings from the sky might preserve something historically significant as well. Stepping back to view the broader pattern, the evidence becomes undeniable. Repeatedly throughout history, humans have insisted that we originated from above, that essential knowledge was given rather than discovered, that life was actively shaped by figures descending from heavenly realms. This doesn't definitively prove we were placed here intentionally, but it certainly raises the compelling possibility that our ancestors weren't simply engaged in creative dreaming. Maybe they were remembering, however distantly and imperfectly, something genuinely extraordinary that actually occurred. If that interpretation contains truth, it completely reframes our central question. Perhaps we don't merely feel like we were placed here because Earth accommodates us so perfectly. Perhaps our oldest preserved stories are telling us directly and explicitly that we were. When you encounter the ruins of ancient civilizations, you can't help experiencing both profound awe and persistent confusion. Towering pyramids, expansive stone cities, intricate carvings, and astronomical alignments that seem impossibly precise for their historical period. They stand as undeniable proof that humanity achieved extraordinary feats thousands of years ago. But alongside that admiration sits a nagging question that refuses to disappear. How exactly did they accomplish these seemingly impossible tasks? The Sumerians are frequently recognized as humanity's first great civilization. Emerging in ancient Mesopotamia more than 5,000 years ago, they developed sophisticated writing systems, complex mathematical concepts, elaborate irrigation networks, and comprehensive legal codes. They constructed ziggurats, massive stepped temples reaching toward the sky. They tracked stellar movements and created remarkably detailed calendars. When you examine their preserved tablets, the overwhelming impression suggests a culture that began already advanced rather than struggling through primitive early experiments. Their own historical records explicitly state they received instruction from visitors from above, the mysterious Anunnaki. Modern historians interpret these accounts as mythological, but the Sumerians themselves appear to have treated them as factual history. Egypt presents a similarly puzzling situation. The Great Pyramid of Giza rises over 400 feet tall, aligned to cardinal directions with uncanny precision. The massive weight of its construction stones remains staggering, with some blocks exceeding 70 tons. Contemporary cranes would struggle to move such enormous weights, yet ancient builders somehow managed the task using technology we don't fully understand today. Then there's the pyramid's precise alignment with Orion's Belt constellation, suggesting not only extraordinary engineering skill, but sophisticated astronomical knowledge as well. Official explanations maintain that pyramids served as elaborate tombs, but their remarkable design, mathematical precision, and celestial placement leave many researchers unconvinced by traditional interpretations. Mayan and Aztec civilizations also left behind evidence that challenges conventional understanding. Temples rising from Central American jungles, perfectly aligned to solstices and equinoxes. The Mayan calendar achieved accuracy that rivaled modern systems, precisely tracking complex planetary cycles. Their mythological accounts describe gods descending from the sky, bringing essential knowledge and social order. Stone carvings depict figures wearing strange suits with helmet-like headgear and breathing apparatus, sparking endless speculation about whether these represented depictions of actual visitors rather than imaginary deities. In South America, the Nazca lines stretch across Peru's desert landscape as enormous figures of animals and geometric shapes carved into the ground, visible only from aerial perspectives. Birds, monkeys, spiders, and complex patterns, all too massive to appreciate from ground level. Why create images exclusively visible from the sky, unless they were specifically intended to be seen from above? Skeptics suggest they represented ceremonial offerings to gods imagined dwelling in the heavens, but the possibility remains that they functioned as markers or signals directed toward visitors from above. Stonehenge in England presents another mystery, with massive stones aligned to solstices in ways demonstrating profound understanding of astronomy. Individual stones weigh tens of tons, transported from quarries located miles away. How did people lacking modern technology move and arrange them with such mathematical precision? Why align them to solar movements, unless the explicit intention involved carefully tracking heavenly bodies? Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, discovered only during the 1990s, adds yet another puzzling layer. Dating back more than 11,000 years, it predates agriculture, pottery, and written language systems. Yet this remarkable site features enormous stone pillars carved with elaborate animal figures and mysterious symbols, all arranged in perfect circles. Traditional historical understanding struggles to explain how supposed hunter-gatherers, allegedly lacking complex organizational structures, could construct such an impressive monument. The sophisticated carvings suggest symbolic thinking, ritualistic practices, and astronomical knowledge far exceeding what we'd expect from that time period. This raises the intriguing possibility that humans weren't working entirely alone in shaping their developmental path, that essential knowledge was somehow introduced from external sources. Ancient Indian texts known as the Vedas describe vimanas, flying chariots used by gods during battles and journeys across the heavens. These descriptions contain surprisingly technical details about propulsion systems, speed capabilities, and even aerial combat tactics. Were these accounts purely products of creative imagination, or did they preserve echoes of something people actually witnessed firsthand? China also preserves myths of celestial visitors. The Yellow Emperor, considered the founding father of Chinese civilization, is frequently described as descending from heavenly realms. Historical accounts credit him with introducing agriculture, medical knowledge, and governmental systems to humanity. According to legend, his eventual departure occurred aboard a dragon that carried him back toward the sky. When you examine all these diverse civilizations together, identical patterns emerge repeatedly. Monumental structures, advanced knowledge systems, myths describing visitors, and precise alignments with stellar configurations. Each element alone might be explained through human ingenuity, imagination, or mere coincidence. But taken together, they begin suggesting something far more significant. Some scholars argue that ancient peoples were simply more intelligent and capable than we typically acknowledge. Survival necessities drove remarkable inventions, and established societies effectively shared accumulated knowledge across generations. This explanation certainly contains truth, as human creativity throughout history has proven truly extraordinary. Yet, even accepting this reasoning, certain details continue raising legitimate questions. How did civilizations so early in recorded history develop calendar systems more accurate than ours until only recent decades? How did they cut and transport massive stones with such mathematical precision that modern engineers still struggle replicating their techniques? How did they independently develop mythological traditions so consistently describing beings arriving from the sky? For those who consider the possibility of external visitors, these ancient civilizations appear less like historical anomalies and more like supporting evidence. Perhaps humanity was indeed placed here, guided during its formative stages by those who had traveled this path before us. Perhaps the sudden leaps in cultural development and technological advancement weren't entirely our own independent achievements. Naturally, mainstream academic perspectives remain more cautious and conservative. Archaeologists and historians consistently emphasize that given sufficient time, organized labor, and human ingenuity, our species can accomplish incredible feats. The pyramids, Nazca Lines, and Stonehenge represent remarkable human achievements rather than evidence of alien intervention. Yet the myths persist, the monuments endure, and the unanswered questions continue multiplying. Imagine yourself as one of those ancient people living thousands of years ago. You gaze upward at the stars every night, enjoying skies unpolluted by modern city lights. The heavens form a vast canvas of brilliant patterns spread above you. You observe how the sun and moon govern seasonal changes, ocean tides, and life's natural rhythms. Then one day, something extraordinary descends from that celestial realm. A figure, a craft, a mysterious light. It teaches, provides guidance, or simply leaves an impression so profound that your entire culture carries it forward across thousands of years. How would you preserve such a memory? You'd construct monuments precisely aligned with heavenly bodies. You'd carve symbolic representations into lasting stone. You'd develop stories about divine beings who came from above. And you'd pass those narratives forward until they transformed into myths, eventually becoming indistinguishable from religious beliefs. Perhaps that's exactly what occurred throughout human history. We don't need to embrace theories about alien visitors or divine interventions to appreciate this possibility. Even considered as pure speculation, It opens our imagination in fascinating ways. It connects the puzzles of sudden evolutionary leaps with the myths of sky beings and the mysteries surrounding ancient architecture. It suggests our origins might not be entirely natural, that something or someone might have played an active role in placing us here. Whether you believe these visitors were gods, extraterrestrials, or future humans reaching backward through time, the stories preserved by ancient civilizations invite us to continue wondering, because within every ziggurat, pyramid, stone circle, and desert carving, there exists a voice whispering across the centuries, a voice persistently saying, "We were not alone." Walking among ruins left by ancient peoples creates the sensation that the stones themselves are communicating, not through words we can easily understand, but through patterns, alignments, and carvings that point beyond their own historical era. Across different continents, civilizations that never contacted one another seem to whisper identical messages. Their temples point toward stars, their monuments align with solstices, their walls bear symbols that repeat across completely separate cultures. It appears as though stone and sky shared a common language, a method for leaving permanent messages when spoken words alone couldn't endure through time. Consider the Great Pyramid once more. Its sides align almost perfectly with cardinal directions, deviating only slightly in ways that remain remarkable given the tools supposedly available during construction. Internal shafts point directly towards stars in Orion's belt and towards Sirius, suggesting the builders wanted to connect their rulers' final resting places with the heavens above. This represents more than architecture, it's active communication, a message written through precise alignment, declaring that the sky held profound significance, that whoever constructed this monument wasn't merely honoring the dead, but actively reaching toward the stars. In Central America, the Mayan city of Chichen Itza contains the Temple of Kukulkan, a stepped pyramid, featuring a remarkable design trick. During equinox periods, shadows form along the steps in patterns that make a serpent appear to slither down the pyramid's side. This effect isn't accidental. It represents precision astronomy and architectural design combined to create symbolic spectacle twice yearly. The underlying message proves subtle yet clear. The people who built this possessed not only the ability to observe cosmic patterns, but the skill to embed that knowledge permanently into stone. The Nazca lines stretching across Peru's desert represent another whisper written directly on the earth. Animals, geometric shapes, and long straight lines etched into the soil, fully visible only from aerial perspectives. Some scholars suggest they functioned as ceremonial pathways, others propose they were offerings to divine beings. But the fact that they're visible exclusively from above continues puzzling researchers. If you wanted to leave messages for the heavens, what better method than carving them into the ground on such a massive scale? In Britain, Stonehenge stands as one of humanity's most enduring mysteries. Its stones mark midsummer sunrise and midwinter sunset with mathematical precision. For people who depended entirely on seasonal rhythms for survival, knowing when to plant and harvest crops proved essential. But the level of astronomical alignment suggests something beyond mere practicality. It suggests deep reverence. The stones were positioned to connect earth and sky, time and eternity in permanent harmony. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey pushes these timeline mysteries even further backward. The carvings decorating its massive pillars depict animals, celestial symbols, and abstract designs that continue puzzling researchers. Some experts argue that certain carvings may represent star patterns or even record specific astronomical events like comet appearances. If this interpretation proves correct, then humans more than 11,000 years ago possessed not only the capacity for sophisticated symbolic art, but also the knowledge to track heavenly movements and record them permanently in stone. Across the Pacific Ocean, Easter Island's Moai statues face inward toward villages, but many align precisely with celestial events and seasonal changes. Their construction remains an extraordinary feat of human ingenuity, requiring the transport of massive stone figures across the island using limited technology. Their expressions, carved with remarkable detail and care, seem to carry quiet weight, as though they too whisper something profound about connection, ancestry, or perhaps guidance received from beyond earthly realms. These patterns continue appearing worldwide. In Cambodia, Angkor Wat aligns perfectly with solstices and equinoxes. In Mexico, Teotihuacan follows a grid layout that mirrors constellation patterns. In Peru, Machu Picchu's Intihuatana stone tracks solar movements with remarkable accuracy. Throughout the world, civilizations invested enormous effort anchoring their greatest stone achievements to celestial movements. But why? From practical perspectives, These alignments help track time, seasons, and agricultural cycles. Survival depended heavily on knowing when rains would arrive, when to plant crops, when to harvest food, but the scale and precision often exceed basic survival requirements. It feels like something more than practicality alone. It feels like deliberate communication, as though builders were leaving messages not only for themselves, but for anyone who might come after them, or anyone who might be observing from above. This observation brings us back to the concept of intentional placement. If our ancestors received guidance from visitors, or if they preserved memories of origins in the skies, then aligning stone monuments with stars would represent a natural response. It would provide a method for honoring those origins, for reaching back toward the place they believed they originated from, or the beings they believed had shaped their development. Symbols carved into stone reinforce these connections. Spirals, circles, and star-like shapes appear in rock art across every continent. In European caves, North American petroglyphs, and African carvings, similar patterns emerge repeatedly. Some resemble suns, others look like stars, still others appear to show objects in motion. Were these simply artistic expressions, or attempts to record something actually witnessed in the sky? In various locations, carvings seem to depict figures wearing unusual helmets or suits, leading some researchers to speculate about ancient representations of visitors. Skeptics argue these show stylized representations of shamans or deities, but whether spiritual or literal in meaning, the symbolism remains consistent across cultures: transformation, power, and connection to heavenly realms. Consider how long these stone messages have endured. Paper decays, wood burns, even metals corrode over time, but stone persists across millennia. When ancient people wanted to leave something truly permanent, they turned to stone, carving, stacking, aligning, embedding their most important knowledge into the hardest materials available. They may not have known exactly who would see their work, but they understood someone someday would discover it. If you accept that humans might have been placed here intentionally, these whispers in stone begin resembling breadcrumbs, deliberately left behind, reminders preserved across time, suggesting we weren't entirely alone during our developmental journey. Even if no visitors ever returned, the monuments continue pointing toward the skies, echoing the persistent memory that we once looked there for our ultimate origins. Astronomers sometimes describe the universe as a book written in pure light. Stars function as letters, galaxies form sentences, constellations tell complete stories. Ancient peoples seem to have viewed it similarly, but they added their own writing in stone. Together, sky and earth create an ongoing dialogue, a conversation stretching across countless generations. Today, when we study these alignments and carvings, we apply modern scientific methods. We use satellites to map Nazca lines, computer models to verify pyramid alignments, and 3D scanning technology to record intricate carvings. But the fundamental feeling remains unchanged from our ancestors' experience: curiosity mixed with the sense that something greater continues whispering to us across time. Perhaps that's the essential point these ancient monuments make. The whispers don't shout obvious answers. They don't provide clear explanations. They don't explicitly state whether we were placed here, or evolved naturally. But they invite us to wonder. They encourage us to look upward at the stars, just as our ancestors did, and ask fundamental questions about who we are and where we came from. Stone may be heavy, but whispers prove light and enduring. When combined together, they create something truly extraordinary, a message that survives across millennia, subtle yet persistent, patiently waiting for us to listen. When people seriously consider the possibility that humanity might have been placed here intentionally, one of the first questions that naturally arises concerns who would have done the placing. This inevitably leads to contemplating the notion of higher intelligence, some form of cosmic gardener tending to life the way we care for fields or forests. This doesn't necessarily mean gods in traditional religious senses, nor does it require extraterrestrials traveling in spacecraft. It could represent any intelligence greater than our own, operating on scales we barely comprehend, gently nudging life in directions that eventually produce beings like ourselves. In nature, gardeners take seeds and place them carefully in prepared soil. They cultivate the ground, provide water, protect developing seedlings, and allow them to grow according to their natural patterns. From the seed's perspective, everything simply happens automatically. Rain falls when needed. Soil provides nutrients. Sunlight arrives at proper intervals. The seeds remain unaware of any gardener's presence. They simply grow and flourish. What if life on Earth operates similarly? From our human perspective, the world appears perfectly suited to our needs. Evolution seems to progress through natural mechanisms. Yet behind these processes, there might exist something or someone carefully shaping environmental conditions, planting essential seeds, then stepping away to let nature take its course. The concept of cosmic gardeners appears in unexpected contexts throughout human culture. Ancient mythologies describe gods descending from heavenly realms to shape humanity, introduce agricultural knowledge, or establish moral laws. Contemporary science fiction explores extraterrestrials seeding planets with genetic material, observing from distant locations to witness what develops. Philosophical traditions contemplate whether higher intelligence might exist beyond our perception, subtly influencing reality through methods we cannot detect or measure. All these diverse images point toward the same intriguing possibility: perhaps we aren't entirely self-created. When scientists discuss panspermia, the theory that life was originally seeded on Earth from elsewhere in the cosmos, they typically frame it as a natural phenomenon. Microscopic organisms could potentially survive on asteroids, traveling through space until landing on fertile worlds like ours. However, this theory doesn't exclude intentional action. If a civilization advanced enough to traverse interstellar distances wanted to spread life throughout the galaxy, they could dispatch vessels filled with spores, genetic material, or even engineered organisms designed for specific environments. To such beings, scattering seeds across various planets would prove no different than farmers spreading grain across fertile fields. Some attempts would fail in hostile environments, others would flourish in welcoming conditions, but somewhere at least one location would witness life blooming magnificently. This raises the fundamental question: are we one of those successful blooms? Did higher intelligence plant us here with deliberate purpose? If so, were they motivated like gardeners seeking beauty and abundance, or like researchers gathering experimental data? Were their intentions benevolent, indifferent, or simply driven by curiosity? Some scientists and philosophers, even without invoking extraterrestrial visitors, discuss intelligence operating at cosmic scales. They propose that the universe itself might possess a kind of self-organizing principle that naturally favors increasing complexity, moving matter and energy toward life and consciousness. In this perspective, the gardener isn't a specific being, but rather a fundamental process, a natural law woven into reality's fabric. Still, the metaphor persists: seeds placed carefully, nurtured appropriately, then left to develop independently. When we imagine higher intelligence, our instinct leads us to envision something resembling ourselves but larger, wiser, more technologically advanced. But what if the scale proves so vast that we can barely recognize it? To an ant, the hand that moves a rock might appear godlike in its power. To us, the force that arranged optimal conditions for life might prove equally incomprehensible. Higher intelligence could be biological, technological, or something completely beyond our current categories of understanding. Ancient cultures frequently pictured their deities as gardeners, not always literally, but in terms of shaping landscapes, planting knowledge, and pruning civilizations when they grew dangerously unbalanced. Floods, fires, and rebirths appear as common themes throughout these traditions, suggesting natural cycles of planting and harvesting. The gods provide essential gifts like fire, agriculture, writing systems, and legal codes, then step back to let humanity develop independently. Sometimes they return to check progress, sometimes they disappear entirely, but the relationship consistently resembles that of caretakers tending fragile crops. Perhaps that's why the gardening metaphor proves so compelling. It doesn't require constant intervention or micromanagement. A skilled gardener doesn't hover over each individual leaf every moment. They establish proper conditions, check periodically for problems, and trust that natural growth will occur as intended. If we were indeed placed here intentionally, maybe that's exactly what happened. The stage was carefully prepared, the seed was planted with precision, and everything else was entrusted to time and natural processes. There's also the fascinating possibility that we represent only one garden among many. If you possessed the ability to spread life as a cosmic gardener, why limit yourself to a single planet? Perhaps Earth constitutes just one experiment among countless others. Perhaps other civilizations are developing elsewhere, planted in their own fertile environments, waiting to be discovered, or never intended to encounter us at all. The universe stretches beyond human comprehension, containing billions of stars and planets in numbers that challenge imagination. If gardeners truly exist, they might have cultivated countless worlds throughout the galaxy. Naturally, skeptics argue that we don't require gardeners to explain life's existence. Evolution provides sufficient explanation through natural selection, genetic mutation, and environmental adaptation. Physics, chemistry, and biology create complexity without external assistance. But even within that scientific framework, the question of why the universe permits life at all remains profoundly mysterious. Why do the fundamental constants of physics align so precisely to allow matter, energy, and eventually consciousness to exist? Why is the cosmos structured in ways that produce stars, planets, and ultimately beings capable of contemplating their own existence? Some scientists call this phenomenon fine-tuning. Others argue it simply reflects the only universe in which conscious observers could exist to notice these conditions. But for those open to the Gardner hypothesis, fine-tuning resembles deliberate design rather than accidental coincidence. Consider how intelligence itself naturally behaves once it reaches sufficient sophistication. Humans have already begun actively shaping life on our planet through selective breeding, genetic engineering, and synthetic biology. We modify crops to increase productivity and nutritional value. We adapt animals to serve human needs more effectively. We even design microscopic organisms for medical treatments and industrial applications. In pursuing these activities, we essentially become gardeners ourselves, albeit on a limited planetary scale. If we're capable of such interventions only a few thousand years after civilization began, imagine what a species millions of years ahead of us could accomplish. For them, seeding entire planets with life might prove as simple as planting agricultural fields is for contemporary humans. Once placed in suitable environments, these seeds might develop without ever knowing they were deliberately planted. They would grow, evolve, develop cultural stories and scientific understanding, then eventually begin wondering about their own mysterious origins. Perhaps that describes exactly what's happening here on Earth. Some researchers suggest that if higher intelligence did place us here intentionally, they might have encoded subtle hints within our biological systems, not only in mythological stories and ancient monuments, but directly in DNA itself. After all, DNA functions as a code, a sophisticated language of life written in chemical sequences. What if deliberate messages are hidden within those patterns, waiting for us to develop sufficient knowledge to discover them? This possibility sounds like science fiction, but serious scientists have actually considered it. If you wanted to leave a permanent signature that would survive across geological ages, DNA would provide an ideal hiding place for such information. Other thinkers argue that evidence exists within consciousness itself. The very fact that we can formulate these questions, that we possess the ability to reflect on our own existence, might itself constitute proof of intentional placement. No other known species spends time staring at stars and wondering who placed them in the sky. No other creatures build telescopes, temples, and theoretical frameworks to reach beyond their immediate survival needs. Maybe this urge to explore and question represents the gardener's signature, written not in stone monuments or genetic code, but embedded directly within conscious thought itself. Imagine for a moment that you are the cosmic gardener. You plant life on a promising world, observe its development, and wait patiently to see what emerges. Initially, it's purely about survival, basic reproduction and adaptation. Then gradually, intelligence begins flowering. Eventually, these beings construct monuments, track stellar movements, and start suspecting they were placed intentionally. Maybe you experience satisfaction, or whatever emotion a cosmic gardener might feel when witnessing this development. Perhaps that recognition was the ultimate goal from the beginning, to discover whether the seeds would eventually awaken and recognize their planted origins. Naturally, we may never know with absolute certainty. The gardener, if one exists, may never return to check their work. Perhaps they visited long ago, and only mythological memories preserve traces of that contact. But this possibility fundamentally shapes how we understand ourselves and our place in existence. If we represent seeds in a cosmic garden, then our presence here isn't random or accidental. We're part of a larger pattern, contributors to a more expansive story. Maybe that's why the gardener metaphor feels comforting, even to those who don't accept it literally. It offers genuine purpose and meaning. It suggests we truly belong somewhere. It frames our struggles and existential questions not as meaningless chaos, but as natural aspects of growth and development. Whether we envision higher intelligence as divine beings, extraterrestrial civilizations, future humans, or the universe's inherent organizing principles, the gardener concept persists because it resonates with something deep within human nature. It transforms the puzzle of our origins into a story of care, intention, and belonging. As we continue this exploration together, it's worth keeping that image present in our minds, not because it provides all the answers we seek, but but because it reminds us that questions themselves function like seeds. Once planted in fertile minds, they grow, sending roots deep into our imagination and branches high into our understanding. If you've ever gazed upward at the night sky and wondered whether those distant stars might be observing us in return, you're participating in a question that has captivated humanity throughout history. For as long as our species has existed, the mystery of whether life originated on this planet or arrived from somewhere else has stirred both scientific curiosity and imaginative speculation. Among the theories attempting to answer this fundamental question, one stands out for its elegant simplicity yet profound implications. It's called panspermia, and at its essential core, it suggests that life might not have begun on Earth at all. Instead, according to this theory, life was seeded here from elsewhere in the cosmos, transported on comets and asteroids, or perhaps even through the deliberate actions of intelligence far exceeding our own capabilities. The term itself derives from ancient Greek, meaning seeds everywhere, painting a picture of the universe not as a dead, empty void, but as a fertile field scattered throughout with life's fundamental building blocks. According to panspermia, planets function like patches of soil with varying conditions. Some prove barren and lifeless, others remain hostile to biological development, but occasionally one possesses exactly the right environmental factors to allow planted seeds to flourish. Earth might represent one of those exceptionally rare, welcoming patches. All the life we recognize today, including humanity itself, could result from seeds planted here in the distant past. Initially, panspermia sounds like pure science fiction, life traveling through the vast emptiness of space, hopping from world to world like pollen carried on cosmic winds. But the concept proves far less fantastical than it initially appears. We already understand that microscopic organisms can survive incredibly extreme conditions that would destroy more complex life forms. Bacteria have been discovered clinging to spacecraft exteriors after years exposed to the vacuum of space. Bacterial spores can endure intense radiation, absolute zero temperatures, and complete lack of atmosphere that would immediately kill most living things. Here on Earth, certain microorganisms thrive in boiling hot springs, at crushing depths on ocean floors, and inside solid rock formations deep underground where no sunlight has ever penetrated. If life on our planet can endure such extremes successfully, then imagining that some forms might survive interplanetary journeys becomes significantly more plausible. Meteorite discoveries add substantial weight to panspermia theory. Scientists have found rocks on Earth that definitely originated from Mars, blasted off that planet's surface by massive impacts, and eventually crash-landing here after journeying through space for potentially millions of years. Some of these Martian meteorites contain microscopic structures that resemble fossilized organisms, though the evidence remains hotly debated within scientific communities. Even without clear biological fossils, the demonstrated fact that rocky material can travel between planets carrying complex carbon compounds and organic molecules proves the basic transportation mechanism works. If solid rocks can move between worlds while preserving delicate chemical structures, then life's essential seeds could definitely hitchhike on such cosmic vessels. The next logical step involves asking whether this process occurs randomly or through intentional design. One version, called lithopanspermia, suggests that life spreads naturally throughout the galaxy without any guiding intelligence. Massive collisions launch debris into space, carrying whatever microorganisms happen to be present. After drifting through the void for thousands or millions of years, some fragments eventually land on other planets, delivering life's fundamental ingredients wherever cosmic chance carries them. In this interpretation, life scatters across the cosmos, like mushroom spores, drifting on terrestrial wind, following wherever gravitational forces and orbital mechanics happen to direct them. Another version proposes something far more intentional and purposeful. It envisions advanced civilizations, perhaps billions of years older than human society, deliberately seeding planets with carefully chosen life forms. Their motivations might include spreading their own biological legacy to ensure species survival across interstellar distances. Perhaps they conduct vast experiments to observe what kinds of beings evolve under different planetary conditions. Or maybe they function as cosmic gardeners, planting life wherever suitable conditions exist, simply because they possess the power to do so. Following this intentional possibility, Earth's entire story begins appearing less isolated and more interconnected. Our origins wouldn't represent merely the development of one planet, but rather a chapter within a much larger narrative woven throughout the galaxy. Humanity might constitute a branch on an enormous tree, whose roots extend across light years of space. The mysterious leaps in our evolutionary history, The persistent myths describing beings from the sky, the monuments precisely aligned with stellar configurations, could all represent echoes of a profound truth we've partially forgotten. Perhaps we carry genetic and cultural memories of our cosmic origins, preserved in stories and structures that point back toward our true beginnings. Naturally, skeptics raise important objections to panspermia theory. They ask pointed questions. If life was seeded here from elsewhere, where did it originally begin? Panspermia shifts the location of life's origin, but doesn't solve the fundamental mystery of how it first emerged. The question simply moves to a different cosmic address, without providing ultimate answers. However, this limitation doesn't invalidate the theory's usefulness or importance. Panspermia highlights how life might not be confined to single planets at all. If biological processes succeeded once somewhere in the universe, they likely succeeded multiple times elsewhere. The seeds of life might be scattered throughout space, patiently waiting for appropriate conditions to trigger growth and development. Laboratory experiments on Earth provide tantalizing hints, supporting panspermia's plausibility. When scientists recreate the early conditions believed to exist on primordial Earth, combining lightning, water, and simple atmospheric gases, they consistently observe amino acids forming spontaneously. These protein building blocks represent life's fundamental chemistry. We also know that comets and meteorites regularly contain complex organic molecules, including some of the same compounds essential for biological processes. Combining these established facts with demonstrated microbial resilience, panspermia transforms from wild speculation into a testable, scientifically reasonable hypothesis. But there exists another layer that continues capturing scientific and popular imagination alike. What if the seeds weren't merely random chemistry drifting through space, but carefully selected and deliberately placed? What if intelligence chose them specifically and planted them here with clear purpose? Carl Sagan, one of astronomy's most respected voices, seriously entertained this possibility, suggesting that life could have been seeded intentionally as a method for ensuring its spread throughout the cosmos. Francis Crick, the Nobel Prize-winning scientist who helped discover DNA's structure, also explored this concept, calling it directed panspermia. The fact that such distinguished scientists considered these ideas seriously indicates that while speculative, they aren't merely fantasy or science fiction. Directed panspermia opens profound and somewhat unsettling questions about human existence. If we were seeded deliberately by external intelligence, who accomplished this feat and what motivated them? Were we intended to develop into our current form, or do we represent an experiment that evolved in directions the original gardeners never predicted or planned? Most intriguingly, if they did seed us intentionally, do they continue observing from afar, waiting patiently to see what ultimately becomes of their cosmic planting project? This possibility makes ancient mythological traditions feel dramatically different and potentially more significant. When ancient cultures describe celestial beings creating or guiding humanity, perhaps those accounts preserve cultural memories of the original gardeners. When civilizations precisely align their monuments with stellar patterns, maybe they're honoring the origins they believed arrived from above. These whispers carved in stone, echoes preserved in stories, all pointing back to an era when placement wasn't merely a question, but an actual memory passed down through generations. Then there's DNA itself, often described as life's fundamental code. Written in 4 chemical letters, it carries complete instructions for constructing everything from simple bacteria to complex humans. Some scientists have speculated whether DNA might carry more than purely biological information. If you wanted to leave a message that would survive across geological time, you might embed it within the genetic code itself. One research study even proposed that certain patterns within DNA could be interpreted as mathematical signatures, though such claims remain highly controversial within scientific communities. Nevertheless, the concept persists. If we were indeed seeded here intentionally, perhaps the signature of our cosmic gardeners already exists inside us, encoded in our genes and waiting to be properly decoded. Even setting aside speculative messages, DNA itself appears almost too sophisticated and elegant for accidental development. Its remarkable ability to replicate perfectly, store vast amounts of complex information, and adapt through evolutionary processes seems almost engineered for maximum resilience. Skeptics naturally attribute this to natural selection operating over billions of years, but those who perceive intentional design see what appears to be the perfect seed, crafted specifically to endure across eons and survive journeys between galaxies. Panspermia theory doesn't merely expand our understanding of origins, it also broadens our sense of cosmic kinship. If life has been scattered throughout the stars, then we likely aren't alone in the universe. Other planets might harbor different seeds developing into entirely different beings. Some might remain simple microbial life, while others could represent civilizations far more advanced than our own. If we were placed here deliberately, then perhaps they were too, planted by the same cosmic gardeners across different worlds and star systems. Perhaps one day these separate gardens will eventually meet and recognize each other. Picture that extraordinary moment. Two distinct civilizations, both seeded by identical gardeners, encountering each other across the light years and discovering their distant cousins within a vast cosmic family tree. This possibility completely reframes our search for extraterrestrial intelligence, transforming it from seeking unknown strangers into searching for long-lost relatives scattered among the stars. Of course, we still lack definitive proof for any of these theories. No meteorite has yet yielded undeniable fossils of extraterrestrial life. No signal has arrived from space explicitly telling us we were planted here. No spacecraft has landed declaring itself our original gardener. But the accumulated hints prove intriguing enough to keep these possibilities alive. Microbes surviving the vacuum of space, organic molecules discovered in comets, myths describing creation from stellar realms, sudden unexplained leaps in evolutionary development. Together, these clues whisper of possibilities too fascinating to ignore completely. Even if panspermia ultimately proves incorrect, it has already transformed how we think about life and our place in the universe. It forces us to see biological existence not as something fragile and extraordinarily rare, but as something resilient and potentially widespread throughout the cosmos. It transforms the universe from a barren void into a fertile field scattered with seeds of possibility. Whether those seeds fell randomly through natural processes, or were scattered with deliberate care and intention, they might explain why we exist here at all. So the next time you gaze upward at the night sky, consider that those distant points of light might represent more than just faraway suns. They could be reminders of where we originally came from, markers pointing back to our ultimate home. Maybe we are, in the most fundamental sense, seeds that traveled here from the stars themselves. When people contemplate the possibility of being placed here intentionally, thoughts usually drift upward toward divine beings or visitors from distant star systems. But there exists another possibility equally fascinating, and perhaps even more unsettling. What if it wasn't external entities who placed us here? What if it was ourselves, not us as we exist currently, but us in the far future, possessing knowledge, technology, and capabilities so advanced that we could reach backward through time itself to shape our own beginnings? Time has always proven slippery and mysterious. We measure it precisely with clocks and calendars, yet we also experience it stretching and compressing subjectively. Hours vanish during engaging conversations, while minutes drag endlessly when we're waiting impatiently. Physics takes this temporal flexibility much further than subjective experience. Einstein demonstrated that time isn't absolute but relative, bending and warping with gravity and velocity. The faster you travel, the slower your personal clock runs compared to someone remaining stationary. Near massive objects like black holes, time itself stretches almost to infinity. This means time isn't the rigid, uniform march we once imagined. It's flexible and malleable, something that could potentially be shaped and manipulated under the right conditions. If physical laws permit time to bend and warp, then the concept of moving through it either forward or backward becomes at least theoretically possible. Traveling toward the future represents the easier direction. Astronauts aboard the International Space Station already experience a tiny version of this phenomenon, aging slightly less than people on Earth's surface due to their orbital speed and altitude. Traveling toward the past proves far more complicated, tangled up in logical paradoxes and causality problems. But even there, physics leaves certain possibilities open. Solutions to Einstein's field equations describe theoretical constructs like wormholes, closed time-like curves, and pathways through spacetime that loop back on themselves. If time travel isn't strictly forbidden by the universe's fundamental laws, what might future humanity accomplish with such capabilities? Perhaps they would use temporal travel to visit their own origins, observing evolution unfolding, intervening in subtle ways to ensure their own species' survival. Maybe they would go much further than mere observation, not just watching but actively placing and seeding their own past, carefully shaping evolutionary development to guarantee that when they looked backward from the future, they would find themselves here in the present. Imagine a human civilization tens of thousands of years more advanced than our current state. They've completely mastered genetics, physics, and time itself. They understand their own history with all its fragility and near disasters. They recognize how close humanity came to extinction at various critical points: volcanic winters, asteroid impacts, pandemic diseases, devastating wars. They realize how improbable survival actually was across all those challenges. So they decide to guarantee it wouldn't fail. They send themselves backward through time, not as complete people but as genetic seeds, individual cells, perhaps even entire groups placed strategically in the evolutionary path, to ensure their lineage continues unbroken. In this scenario, human origins don't follow a linear timeline. Instead, they form a closed loop. We exist because future humans ensured we would, and future humans exist because we are here to eventually become them. Cause and effect circle each other endlessly, each element creating the other in an eternal dance. It represents a temporal paradox, but physicists have learned not to dismiss such possibilities too quickly. The universe may not prohibit paradoxes as strictly as our common sense suggests. If future humans really did shape their own past, it might explain many puzzles we observe today: sudden leaps in evolutionary development, unexpected bursts of intelligence, persistent myths describing beings from the sky. If temporal travelers arrived carrying advanced technology, they would appear godlike to ancient peoples. If they intervened in biological processes, they could trigger new capabilities and abilities. If they guided emerging civilizations, they might leave behind traces we now interpret as mythology rather than history. Some theorists even suggest that the so-called ancient astronauts weren't aliens at all, but time travelers from our own future. Figures appearing in strange clothing, arriving in brilliant craft, teaching knowledge far ahead of its historical time. To our ancestors, they would prove indistinguishable from divine beings. To us, they might seem indistinguishable from extraterrestrial visitors, but in reality, they could be ourselves, looping backward through time to plant the essential seeds of our own future existence. If this proves accurate, then being placed here represents not the work of external entities, but humanity ensuring its own survival through temporal intervention. There's something strangely comforting about this possibility. It means we belong here not because we were chosen by outsiders, but because we ultimately chose ourselves. It also suggests that the drive we feel to explore, push forward, and master science and technology might not represent a recent instinct at all. It might be part of a temporal loop we've been participating in throughout history. But the concept also feels deeply unsettling. If future humans placed us here, then we exist within a closed cycle repeating endlessly. Free will becomes questionable. Did we choose our developmental path, or was it already determined by those who came after us? Are we living the original version of history, or one of countless repeated cycles? If they intervened once, do they continue intervening repeatedly, each time correcting, adjusting, pruning the timeline until it fits their desired outcome? Time travel also raises challenging questions about evidence. If future humans did shape our past, how would we possibly know? Perhaps the myths themselves constitute the evidence. Maybe sudden leaps in intelligence represent fingerprints left behind by temporal intervention. Or perhaps they were extremely careful, hiding their presence completely, ensuring history unfolded in ways that appeared entirely natural. The very lack of obvious proof might itself be proof, marking the work of hands that intervened with surgical precision. Human fascination with time travel in literature and media may provide another clue. From ancient myths describing cycles and eternal returns to modern films exploring paradoxes and temporal loops, humans have always been drawn to concepts of moving through time. Perhaps this fascination represents cultural memory passed down through generations, or perhaps it simply reflects the logical conclusion of being a species capable of reflecting on both past and future simultaneously. But if time travel is real rather than fantasy, then our stories might represent less entertainment and more unconscious foreshadowing. Picture this scenario for a moment. You're walking across an open field thousands of years ago. The sky blazes with stars, completely undimmed by artificial lights. Suddenly a figure appears wearing strange materials and carrying tools you don't recognize. They speak, but you cannot understand their language. They demonstrate how to plant seeds, create fire, and shape stone into useful tools. To you, they represent a god, a divine messenger, a being from another world entirely. But in reality, they are your direct descendant, looping backward through time to ensure your survival. Because without your success, they will never exist to make the journey. It sounds like pure science fiction, yet it fits observed patterns perfectly. It explains myths of beings from the sky, sudden leaps in civilizational development, and the persistent sense that humanity received guidance from somewhere. Maybe we did receive guidance. Maybe it came from ourselves all along. This possibility doesn't necessarily exclude others. Perhaps future humans are part of the same larger story, involving cosmic gardeners, extraterrestrial visitors, or divine beings. Maybe the universe contains multiple layers, with different intelligences shaping the past through various methods. But the idea that we placed ourselves here possesses a strange symmetry and elegance. It turns the fundamental question inward. Instead of asking who put us here, we ask what if we did it ourselves. If that proves true, then every step we take toward the future simultaneously represents a step toward our own past. Every scientific advance, every physics discovery, every genetic breakthrough brings us closer to the moment when we might complete the temporal loop. Maybe we're destined to become the very beings our ancestors worshipped as gods. Maybe the deities of the past represent the humans of the future, reaching backward to ensure their own existence. The thought challenges our understanding of reality, but it also adds tremendous weight to our current choices. If we are the ones who placed ourselves here, then what we do now matters more than ever before. Our survival, our progress, our ethical decisions, all of it shapes not just the future, but the past as well. The entire loop depends on our success. Perhaps that's the deeper insight this possibility offers. The question of being placed doesn't require gods or aliens to provide an answer. Sometimes the most extraordinary explanation is that it was always us, looking both backward and forward through time simultaneously, ensuring that the chain of existence never breaks. When scientists examine the human genome closely, they discover a story written in chemical code. It reveals a narrative filled with similarities to other life on Earth, providing clear proof that we share common ancestry with everything from fruit flies to whales. But it's also a story containing peculiar twists and unexpected turns, oddities that don't quite fit the smooth path of gradual evolutionary development. Within those genetic anomalies, the question of whether we were placed here quietly resurfaces. Humans share approximately 98% of their DNA with chimpanzees, our closest living evolutionary relatives. On the surface, that percentage suggests we're almost genetically identical, yet the practical difference between chimpanzees and humans proves enormous. Chimps demonstrate intelligence, social complexity and tool use, but they don't construct cities, compose symphonies, or contemplate their own origins. How can such a minimal genetic difference produce such a vast intellectual chasm? One important clue lies in what scientists call regulatory genes. These don't directly construct proteins, but instead control when and how other genes activate and express themselves. A minor adjustment in these regulatory systems can create major differences in development, particularly in brain formation. Humans appear to have experienced a concentrated burst of changes in regulatory DNA shortly before our species emerged. It resembles someone fine-tuning the control switches, not rewriting the entire genetic manual, but fundamentally altering how it gets interpreted and executed. Another genetic anomaly involves human brain size relative to our body mass. Our brains are disproportionately large compared to our physical frame, roughly 3 times bigger than chimpanzee brains. This enlargement carries significant costs. Brains demand enormous amounts of energy, consuming approximately 20% of all the calories we intake daily. They make childbirth extremely dangerous, since oversized heads must squeeze through relatively narrow pelvic openings. They leave human infants helpless and dependent on intensive care for years, while most other animal species achieve independence much more quickly. Evolution typically avoids such expensive biological risks unless the benefits prove extraordinary. Why then did this dramatic brain expansion occur specifically in humans? Why did it happen so suddenly? And why with such remarkable intensity? Human speech capabilities present another fascinating puzzle. We possess a unique variant of the FOXP2 gene directly linked to language processing and vocal control. Mutations in this gene can cause severe difficulties with speech production and grammatical understanding. Other primates carry slightly different versions of this gene and completely lack our sophisticated linguistic abilities. Research suggests that the specifically human version appeared relatively recently in evolutionary terms, within approximately the last few 100,000 years. This doesn't represent gradual development over millions of years, but rather a sudden emergence, as though our capacity for complex language was simply switched on at a specific moment in time. Human DNA also contains segments that appear suspiciously like deliberate insertions. Portions of our genetic code seem to originate from ancient viruses, fragments that merged with our genome long ago through unknown processes. Scientists estimate that up to 8% of human DNA derives from viral sources. In many cases, these insertions remain inactive and apparently functionless, but in others they play absolutely critical roles in human development. One viral gene proves essential for placenta formation, making mammalian reproduction possible. Another appears to affect brain function in ways we're still discovering. This raises a strange and compelling question. Were these simply accidental infections that happened to benefit us, or were they strategically placed components inserted into our genome at precisely the right developmental moments? Scientists also debate what they term human-accelerated regions, stretches of DNA that have changed with unusual speed compared to the same regions in other species. Some of these rapidly evolving areas directly link to brain development patterns, others influence how neurons form connections with each other. The fact that they shifted so dramatically while most of our genome remained relatively stable suggests targeted bursts of modification rather than gradual drift. Once again, the pattern resembles sudden editorial changes rather than slow evolutionary development. Then there's the mystery of human chromosome 2. Humans possess 23 pairs of chromosomes, while other great apes have 24 pairs. This difference results from a chromosomal fusion event, where two ancestral chromosomes joined end to end to form our current chromosome 2. The original fusion site remains clearly visible within our DNA. While chromosomal fusions aren't completely unprecedented, the timing in human evolution proves particularly intriguing. This fusion created structural changes that may have significantly influenced our developmental trajectory, separating us even further from our closest evolutionary relatives. Some scientists express amazement at how cleanly this fusion worked, preserving essential genetic function while dramatically reshaping our entire genomic architecture. For those open to speculative interpretations, it appears almost like a deliberate modification, a signature deliberately left within our genetic code. Beyond these mechanical details lies the question of what our genes actually make possible. Humans aren't merely intelligent in practical survival terms. We demonstrate creativity, imagination, and capabilities for art, music, mathematics, and philosophical thought. None of these abilities are strictly necessary for survival or reproduction. A species doesn't need to paint cave walls or compose poetry to find food and produce offspring. Yet we engage in these activities naturally and compulsively. Our genetic inheritance provided us with abilities that extend far beyond basic survival requirements. It's as though we were deliberately overbuilt, equipped with mental capacities that seem designed for purposes much greater than simply getting by in the world. Critics of intentional placement theories argue that these genetic oddities can be explained through natural processes alone. Regulatory genes shift through mutation, viruses insert DNA through infection, chromosomes fuse through cellular accidents, and over vast time periods, evolution produces unexpected outcomes through purely random processes. This explanation may indeed prove correct, but the clustering of significant changes specifically in human development, the way they seem to arrive in concentrated bursts rather than gradually, continues attracting scientific attention. Some researchers have even speculated that our genome might contain hidden messages, not in any mystical sense, but in mathematical patterns or sequence arrangements, that could be interpreted as intentional communication. One controversial study suggested that portions of human DNA display mathematical structures extremely unlikely to arise through pure chance. Whether or not such claims withstand scientific scrutiny, the mere fact that researchers pose these questions demonstrates how genuinely unusual our genetic code appears compared to other species. If future humans were indeed shaping their own evolutionary past, as we explored earlier, the genome would represent the perfect intervention point. Adjust a few regulatory switches, insert strategic sequences, trigger specific fusions, and suddenly brain capacity expands, language emerges, and complex culture takes off. If extraterrestrial gardeners were cultivating human development, DNA would also serve as their primary tool. Instead of constructing cities for us directly, they would construct the biological instructions within us, allowing us to grow naturally into what we eventually became. Perhaps this explains why so many mythological traditions describe humans as being created or shaped by divine beings. Clay molded into living form, dust given breath, ancestors fashioned from maize or carved from wood. In modern scientific terms, maybe that clay, that dust, that organic material, represented DNA being altered and arranged by unseen hands operating with advanced knowledge. Even if none of these changes occurred through intentional design, The genetic oddities remind us how fragile and improbable human existence truly is. A few different mutations, an alternative chromosomal fusion, a missing viral insertion, and we might not exist at all in our current form. The fact that we do exist, equipped with minds capable of reflecting on their own origins, feels almost miraculous regardless of the underlying mechanisms. So our genetic code, whether shaped by natural forces or external guidance, represents much more than simple biology. It serves as a detailed record of where we came from, filled with hints, puzzles, and tantalizing possibilities. It constitutes the fundamental script of our existence. Within its anomalies and unusual features, we glimpse the possibility that maybe, just maybe, we were placed here not entirely through accident, but through some form of deliberate design. Consciousness represents one of those concepts that sounds deceptively simple until you attempt to explain it clearly. It means being aware of your surroundings, but it also means being aware that you are aware. It encompasses having thoughts, but also possesses the ability to reflect on those thoughts, to examine them carefully, to wonder not only about what is happening around you, but why it's happening, and what deeper significance it might hold. Animals demonstrate awareness in their own ways. A cat understands when it feels hungry. A bird recognizes when to migrate south for winter. A dolphin identifies its pod companions and communicates with them. But humans seem to operate on an entirely different level of consciousness. We don't simply react to environmental stimuli. We construct elaborate inner worlds filled with memory, imagination, and meaning. This fundamental difference lies at the heart of the consciousness puzzle. From an evolutionary standpoint, consciousness proves extremely difficult to explain satisfactorily. Basic survival doesn't actually require philosophical contemplation. It doesn't demand painting elaborate images on cave walls, composing complex music, or asking profound questions about what happens after death. Yet humans engage in all these activities naturally, and have done so for tens of thousands of years. Our ancient ancestors sang, danced, carved artistic objects, and told elaborate stories long before they constructed permanent cities or developed agricultural systems. The drive to express creativity and reflect on existence seems built into human nature from our very beginnings. Some scientists argue that consciousness simply represents an emergent property of sufficiently complex brain networks. Once neural connections reach a certain threshold of sophistication, awareness naturally arises as an inevitable byproduct. In this materialist view, our subjective experience of being alive amounts to nothing more than billions of brain cells firing in intricate patterns. But even if this explanation proves accurate, it doesn't adequately account for the extraordinary richness of human consciousness. Why should mere complexity produce not just basic awareness, but self-awareness, creativity, moral reasoning, and what many describe as a sense of having a soul? Other researchers suggest that consciousness may serve important practical survival functions. Being able to mentally simulate future scenarios helps us plan and avoid dangers. Reflecting on our past actions allows us to learn from mistakes and improve our decision-making. Complex language depends on the ability to represent abstract ideas symbolically, and consciousness provides exactly that capacity. But even these practical explanations leave significant gaps in our understanding. Why do we imagine not just realistic future scenarios, but impossible ones like flying without mechanical assistance or visiting distant planets? Why do we create art that serves no immediate survival function whatsoever? Why do we wrestle obsessively with questions about purpose and existence that have no clear or practical answers? When you step back and examine the bigger picture, human consciousness begins appearing as something more than just a survival tool. It provides us with access to imagination, curiosity, and transcendence. It makes us perpetually restless, always reaching for something more, never completely satisfied with current circumstances. This restlessness proves highly unusual in the natural world. Most animals live contentedly within their ecological niches. Humans constantly attempt to break out of any limitations imposed on them. This is precisely where the concept of intentional placement quietly re-enters the discussion. If someone wanted to design a species capable of questioning, exploring, and seeking deeper meaning, they would equip it with exactly what humans possess: sophisticated consciousness. Not merely awareness of the external world, but awareness of the self, the ability to ask why about everything, and an insatiable hunger for answers to life's mysteries. Perhaps that represents the gardener's signature, embedded not in our bones or genes, but directly within our minds. Ancient mythological traditions often point toward this interpretation. Stories describing gods breathing life into clay or dust aren't merely about physical creation, but about the divine gift of consciousness itself. Breath serves as a universal symbol of spirit and awareness. To receive breath means to receive a thinking mind. In many cultural traditions, humans are distinguished from animals not primarily by physical characteristics, but by their capacity to think abstractly, make moral choices, worship higher powers, and wonder about existence itself. In contemporary times, scientists continue wrestling with what consciousness actually represents at its core. Some argue it emerges entirely from material processes involving neurons and brain chemistry. Others suggest consciousness may be fundamental to reality itself, like space and time. In this alternative view, consciousness isn't produced by brain activity, but channeled through it, similar to how a radio receiver tunes into electromagnetic signals that already exist in the environment. If this proves accurate, then human consciousness isn't simply an accident of biological evolution, but rather a window into something much deeper, perhaps even evidence that we're part of a larger cosmic design. Consider the phenomenon of dreams. Every night, our minds create elaborate worlds that feel completely real, complete with visual imagery, sounds, and emotional responses. We live entire lifetimes within these dreams, then wake and retain vivid memories of the experience. Why would evolution provide us with such sophisticated inner theaters? Problem solving and memory consolidation might explain some aspects of dreaming, but the sheer richness and creativity of dream experiences suggests something more significant. Dreams reveal the extraordinary creativity built directly into consciousness, our ability to generate alternate realities beyond the physical world we normally inhabit. Human language represents another reflection of our consciousness' uniqueness. It allows us not only to share practical information, but to construct entire systems of abstract thought. Through words we can describe past events, imagine future possibilities, and invent completely abstract concepts like justice, love, or infinity. While animals communicate effectively for their needs, humans create profound meaning through language. We pass complex stories across generations, shaping culture, preserving history, and forming collective identity. Our consciousness doesn't merely reflect the external world passively. It actively remakes reality through symbols, narratives, and shared meanings. Then there's the remarkable human capacity for moral reasoning. Humans experience not only desires and instinctual drives, but also feel moral obligations. We constantly ask what constitutes right and wrong behavior. We develop elaborate systems of law and ethics. We willingly sacrifice personal benefits for ideals that transcend individual survival. Morality might have evolutionary roots in cooperative behavior that benefited group survival, but the sophisticated depth of human moral reasoning seems to exceed purely evolutionary explanations. We engage in complex arguments about fairness, justice, and compassion, even when these discussions don't directly benefit us personally. Once again, consciousness propels us beyond purely practical considerations into transcendent territory. Artistic expression may provide the most striking example of consciousness exceeding survival requirements. From the earliest cave paintings discovered by archaeologists to modern symphonies performed in concert halls, humans have consistently invested enormous energy into creating beauty for its own sake. Art doesn't provide nutrition or physical protection, yet it has remained an integral part of human existence for tens of thousands of years. Some scientists propose that artistic expression strengthens social bonds and community cohesion, but that explanation feels inadequate. Art appears to emerge from a much deeper psychological need, a compulsion to express what cannot be communicated through ordinary words, to capture profound meaning, to connect with something transcendent beyond our immediate material existence. If we were indeed placed here intentionally, perhaps this represents the clearest evidence available to us, not found in the monuments we constructed, or the genes we inherited, but embedded within the consciousness that compels us to wonder, create, and seek understanding. It's precisely our awareness that drives us to ask the fundamental question, what if we were placed here deliberately? Philosophers refer to this as the hard problem of consciousness. It's not simply about understanding how brain mechanisms function, but about why subjective inner experience exists at all. Why isn't the brain merely a biological machine processing inputs and outputs without any accompanying awareness? Why does a you exist inside your head, observing, feeling, and questioning everything? No one possesses a definitive answer to these mysteries, but that lack of certainty keeps possibilities open to interpretation. Maybe consciousness isn't an evolutionary accident, but rather a gift, a form of placement, a deliberate sign. Take a moment to contemplate how genuinely extraordinary it is that you exist here right now, listening and reflecting and being aware. Billions of years of cosmic history culminated in this precise moment. Atoms forged within dying stars eventually became living cells. Cells developed into complex organisms, organisms evolved into humans, and now here you are, consciously aware of this entire magnificent process. It feels both extraordinary and purposeful. Even if the underlying mechanisms operate through natural processes, the subjective experience of consciousness makes existence feel intentionally designed. Perhaps that's the essential point. Maybe regardless of whether we were literally placed here by external agents, our awareness naturally makes us feel as though we were. In this sense, human consciousness represents both the central puzzle and its own answer. It's what enables us to question our origins, and it's also what makes us feel genuinely at home within the mystery. When we examine the human story objectively, one characteristic stands out above all others. We developed sophisticated intelligence with remarkable speed. For millions of years, our evolutionary ancestors created the same basic types of stone tools, hunted using identical methods, lived in small nomadic groups, and left behind only scattered archaeological traces. Then almost suddenly, in evolutionary terms, artistic expression exploded across cave walls worldwide. Complex language systems developed, agricultural practices appeared, and within what amounts to a geological heartbeat, we were constructing elaborate cities and launching machines into space. It's not merely that humans are intelligent compared to other species, it's that we became intelligent so rapidly, almost impossibly fast by normal evolutionary standards. From a biological perspective, this developmental speed proves genuinely puzzling. Evolution typically operates slowly and methodically, working through trial and error processes, selecting traits that enhance survival and reproductive success. Most species undergo gradual changes across hundreds of thousands or millions of years. Yet humans appear to have leaped ahead dramatically, somehow skipping evolutionary steps that other creatures never managed to navigate. Dolphins, elephants, and crows demonstrate remarkable intelligence within their own contexts, but their cognitive abilities haven't produced civilizations, telescopes, or mathematical systems. What made our developmental path so dramatically different, and why did this transformation happen with such unprecedented speed? Anthropologists have identified one crucial aspect of this phenomenon as the cognitive revolution. Approximately 50,000 years ago, humans began displaying clear evidence of symbolic thinking. Decorative beads, intricate carvings, elaborate cave paintings, and complex rituals appeared almost from nowhere in the archaeological record. Tools that had remained essentially unchanged for millennia suddenly became far more sophisticated and specialized. The transition resembles less a gradual drift, and more like someone flipped a cognitive switch. Then agricultural practices emerged around 10,000 years ago, again appearing simultaneously across multiple regions of the world within a compressed time frame. Hunter-gatherer societies that had lived in sustainable balance with natural ecosystems for thousands of years suddenly began cultivating crops, establishing permanent settlements, and creating surplus food stores. Those surpluses enabled job specialization, trade networks, and social hierarchies. They also made possible cities, governmental systems, and monumental architecture. Within merely a few thousand years, human societies transformed from scattered tribal groups into vast empires spanning entire continents. Then technological development accelerated even further. During just the last few centuries, we've progressed from horses and hand tools to computers and space rockets. The Industrial Revolution, Digital Revolution, and Genetic Engineering Revolution have each fundamentally transformed life on scales unmatched by any other known species. This acceleration proves genuinely staggering when you consider the timescales involved. In the time normally required for evolution to modify something as simple as eye color or bone structure, humans have advanced from discovering fire to achieving flight to developing quantum physics. The central question becomes whether this represents normal evolutionary development or something exceptional. Are we simply the fortunate result of evolution stumbling upon a particularly effective formula, or did some external force push us ahead of natural timelines? Do we represent a predictable evolutionary outcome, or are we statistical outliers who became too intelligent too quickly? If you imagine humanity from an outside perspective, observing from a great distance, the picture appears genuinely strange. A planet teeming with life, balanced within stable ecosystems for millions of years, then suddenly, one species begins dramatically altering everything. Forests get cleared, rivers redirected, animals domesticated, entire landscapes reshaped according to human plans. The pace of change proves so rapid that the planet itself shifts in response. Atmospheric composition, climate patterns, ocean chemistry, all modified by a species that appeared in cosmic terms almost yesterday. It's certainly possible that intelligence of this magnitude simply represents a rare evolutionary development, and when it finally emerges anywhere, it naturally explodes with rapid progress. But it's equally possible that our unprecedented developmental speed points towards something genuinely unusual in our origins. Perhaps we received external assistance or guidance. Perhaps we were placed here with minds already calibrated for accelerated development. Ancient myths and legends consistently echo this interpretation. Countless cultures describe humanity receiving gifts of essential knowledge, fire, agriculture, written language, legal systems, from beings originating in the sky, or gods dwelling above earthly realms. These traditional stories don't portray intelligence as something we earned through slow, gradual development. Instead, they frame advanced capabilities as something delivered suddenly and completely. Prometheus brings fire instantaneously. Quetzalcoatl teaches agricultural techniques. Thoth provides writing systems. This same pattern repeats consistently across the globe in completely separate cultures. Even within modern scientific understanding, some explanations for human intelligence development feel less like gradual evolutionary steps and more like dramatic leaps forward. The FOXP2 gene, enabling language abilities, the rapid expansion of brain volume, the unusual clustering of human-accelerated regions within our DNA. Each development appears more like a deliberate edit than gradual change, modifications that occurred far too quickly for conventional evolutionary comfort. This remarkable speed raises another troubling question. Are we adequately prepared for the intelligence we currently possess? In natural systems, species typically adapt slowly over long periods, providing sufficient time for ecosystems to adjust accordingly. Predators evolve alongside their prey, plants adapt alongside climate changes, maintaining essential balance throughout the process. Humans completely bypassed that natural balancing mechanism. Our intelligence development outpaced everything else around us. We create tools and weapons far faster than we develop the wisdom necessary to handle them responsibly. We can split atoms before learning to resolve conflicts peacefully. We can modify genetic codes before fully understanding their implications. We're essentially children wielding godlike powers, and that dangerous imbalance may represent the greatest threat we face. If we were placed here intentionally, perhaps this precarious imbalance represents the actual test we're meant to face. Maybe we received advanced intelligence deliberately, not to survive comfortably, but to struggle with the enormous responsibility such capabilities bring. If so, then being too intelligent too quickly isn't a developmental flaw, but rather a purposeful challenge designed to force us to grow into the power we've been given. But if we weren't placed here by external agents, if our intelligence simply represents a natural evolutionary outcome, then the question persists: why did this development happen with such unprecedented speed? Why haven't other species followed similar developmental paths? Why does the fossil record consistently show long periods of stability, interrupted only by sudden bursts of change? Why are we the only known species engaged in writing, building complex civilizations, and reflecting on existence at this scale? Some scientists argue that pure chance played a significant role in our development. Perhaps minor genetic changes combined in exactly the right proportions, producing advanced intelligence as an unexpected side effect. Perhaps dramatic climate changes pressured our ancestors into developing enhanced adaptability, forcing rapid brain growth as a survival mechanism. Perhaps language capabilities created a snowball effect, with each generation building upon previous knowledge until cultural development accelerated exponentially. These explanations make logical sense and fit with our understanding of natural processes, but they also highlight exactly how improbable our evolutionary outcome truly was. If intelligence development is that fragile and dependent on precise conditions, then perhaps it doesn't occur frequently throughout the universe. Perhaps we represent a genuinely rare exception, one that appears suspiciously intentional despite natural explanations. Imagine another world somewhere in the cosmos, complete with plant life, animal species, complex ecosystems, and natural balance. But no species on that world questions the meaning of distant stars. No species constructs monuments or reflects on its own existence. That world remains stable, peaceful, and utterly ordinary. Earth resembled that description too, until humans appeared and changed everything. Our emergence proved disruptive, sudden, and completely transformative. Whether through deliberate design or pure accident, We fundamentally altered the rules governing life on this planet. So are we too intelligent for our own good, developing too quickly for safety? Perhaps the intelligence we've gained has granted us power far beyond what our evolutionary ancestors could have imagined possible. It has also provided us with the unprecedented ability to completely destroy ourselves. Nuclear weapons, climate change, engineered diseases, all represent products of minds that advanced far faster than the wisdom needed to guide them safely. Maybe every intelligent species throughout the universe faces this same dangerous phase, a hazardous adolescence of civilization, where knowledge outpaces judgment. Most species encountering this challenge may not survive the transition. The critical question becomes whether humanity will successfully navigate this perilous period. Perhaps that survival challenge represents the real answer to why we developed intelligence so rapidly in the first place. Maybe intelligence functions as a cosmic filter, a universal test built into the fabric of reality. Only species that can successfully balance knowledge with wisdom manage to pass through this developmental bottleneck. If we succeed in this challenge, we join the greater ongoing story of cosmic evolution. If we fail, we simply vanish from existence, leaving only archaeological ruins behind as evidence we ever existed. The puzzle of human intelligence isn't only about understanding our past origins, but about determining our future trajectory. We're intelligent enough to question whether we were placed here intentionally. We're sophisticated enough to imagine cosmic gardeners, time-traveling future humans, or divine beings actively shaping our story. But the ultimate question remains, are we wise enough to handle the intelligence we already possess? The unprecedented pace of our mental development may represent the greatest mystery of all. Whether we're too smart, developed too soon, or progressing exactly as intended, this rapid evolution has brought us to this precise moment in history, questioning our origins and wondering what comes next. If we entertain the possibility, even briefly, that humanity was intentionally placed here, then the most obvious question naturally follows: why would anyone do such a thing? If some entity or intelligence chose this specific planet, this particular species, this exact moment in cosmic history, what purpose could they have had in mind? It's one thing to speculate about the mechanisms of our arrival, whether through cosmic gardeners, future humans, or beings from distant star systems. It's quite another to tackle the more challenging question that cuts much deeper into the mystery: what ultimate goal could such placement serve? Purpose proves elusive even within our individual lives, as we constantly search for meaning behind the choices we make, the paths we follow, and the events we experience. When we expand that search to encompass all of humanity, the scale becomes almost overwhelming to contemplate. Still, the fundamental question persists with quiet insistence: if we were placed here, then why? One possibility suggests we represent part of a vast experiment. Perhaps an advanced civilization wanted to observe what would happen if intelligence took root on this particular world. They planted us here, modified our genetic development, or subtly nudged our evolution, then stepped back to watch the results unfold. From their perspective, Earth might function as an elaborate laboratory, humanity as test subjects, and our entire history as an ongoing data collection project. In this interpretation, our wars and conflicts, our artistic achievements, our scientific discoveries, and our moral failures all represent results of an experiment in progress. If this proves accurate, then the ultimate purpose might not benefit us directly, but rather serve the interests of our unknown observers. We might exist in a position similar to laboratory mice, completely unaware of the larger design while simply living our lives as others study the outcomes. While not the most comforting thought, this scenario fits patterns of behavior humans already display regularly. We conduct experiments on bacteria, plants, and animals, often without them understanding or even knowing the purpose behind their treatment. Perhaps we occupy the same position, just scaled upward to a species level rather than individual organisms. Another intriguing possibility suggests we're part of a cosmic survival project. Maybe life represents something genuinely rare throughout the universe, and advanced beings chose to spread biological existence wherever possible, seeding promising planets as insurance against extinction. In this view, Earth functions as one garden among many, and humanity represents one species among countless others, planted to carry the torch of life forward through time. This purpose centers around continuity and the preservation of existence itself against the hostile emptiness of space. Such an idea carries inherent beauty and meaning. It frames humanity not as cosmic accidents, but as conscious participants in a larger effort to maintain life's presence in a universe that would otherwise remain barren and lifeless. Perhaps the reason we were placed here is elegantly simple: to live fully, to grow and develop, to continue the magnificent story of life in places where it might otherwise never have emerged. A third compelling possibility proposes that we're intended to evolve into something far greater than our current state. Perhaps what we are now represents not the final destination, but merely an intermediate step along a much longer journey. If external agents placed us here, maybe they did so with the expectation that we would develop intelligence and technology sufficient to eventually join them as equals. In this scenario, Earth doesn't function as a laboratory or garden, but rather as a comprehensive training ground, where we develop the capabilities necessary for some greater cosmic role. Our challenges, struggles, and conflicts might all be part of a deliberate process designed to shape us into beings capable of taking our rightful place within a broader cosmic community. Mythological traditions sometimes reflect this theme. Many describe humans as offspring of divine beings, still maturing, still learning, still preparing for something far more significant. The concept of trials, tests, or transformative journeys appears consistently across cultures. Maybe our placement here represents part of such a cosmic trial. Perhaps we're meant to discover our ultimate purpose through the very act of asking these profound questions. Of course, there's also the possibility that we were placed here for reasons completely beyond our comprehension. If the intelligence responsible for our placement operates on levels so far beyond human understanding, their motivations may prove entirely incomprehensible to us. To an ant, the purpose behind a human city remains utterly beyond imagination. To us, the purpose of a cosmic intelligence might prove equally unreachable. In that case, our question why may never receive a satisfactory answer, but even so, the act of questioning itself may still hold tremendous significance. There's also the human-centered answer, that we were placed here simply because we matter, because we're meant to experience life fully, to love deeply, to create meaningfully, to wonder endlessly. Maybe the purpose isn't external at all, but rather internal. We exist in order to live completely, to be conscious, to create our own meaning. Even if we were placed by others, the ultimate why may still be something we define for ourselves. If you accept the experiment interpretation, then the purpose might center around knowledge acquisition. If you embrace the garden view, the purpose might focus on survival and continuity. If you prefer the training ground perspective, the purpose might involve growth and development. And if you adopt the human-centered view, the purpose might simply be existence itself. Some people find deep comfort in believing we were placed here to serve a higher plan or cosmic purpose. Others find comfort in the idea that we create our own meaning and purpose. Both perspectives can coexist harmoniously. Perhaps we were placed here with only the broadest intentions, leaving all the specific details up to us to determine. There's another layer worth considering. Maybe we were placed here not just for ourselves, but to serve others throughout the universe. Perhaps humanity has a unique role to play in the cosmos beyond Earth's boundaries. Maybe we're meant to function as messengers spreading life further into space. Maybe we're meant to contribute something uniquely human, our art, our consciousness, our creativity, to the larger fabric of universal existence. It's tempting to think of purpose as grand and cosmic in scale, but sometimes it might be elegantly simple. Perhaps we were placed here simply because life deserves to exist and flourish. Maybe the why is no more complicated than the pure joy of creation, the impulse to see what might develop. If humans create art, music, and stories for no reason other than self-expression, perhaps higher intelligence creates life for the same fundamental reason, not for utility or function, but for beauty and wonder. Yet darker possibilities also remain worth considering. Maybe we were placed here as a resource to be harvested. Maybe the intelligence that seeded us has no benevolent plan, but sees us as tools or raw material for their own purposes. Perhaps our placement focuses less on our flourishing and more on their utilization. It's deeply unsettling, but not entirely unthinkable. After all, humans themselves raise and shape other species for our own purposes. Cattle, crops, pets, experimental subjects. None of them understand our true reasons or motivations. Perhaps we exist in the same position, waiting to discover whether our existence serves someone else's goals. But whether comforting or unsettling, the question of why fundamentally changes how we see ourselves and our place in existence. If we were placed here intentionally, then our lives aren't isolated random moments in time. They're part of a much larger story, one that stretches beyond our planet and perhaps beyond our current comprehension. Maybe that's the real point of it all. Maybe the purpose of being placed is to make us ask why in the first place, to make us wrestle with questions that push us beyond mere survival, to make us reflect deeply, create meaningfully, and imagine boldly. The fact that we're capable of asking these questions may itself be the answer we've been seeking. In the end, whether the reason involves experimentation, survival, growth, expression, or something we cannot yet fathom, the question remains beautifully open, and in that openness, we discover meaning, because to wonder why we are here is already to step into the purpose of being here at all. When we observe nature, it's easy to see it as mere background scenery, a stage upon which the human story unfolds. But if we pay careful attention, nature doesn't just surround us passively, it actively teaches us. Every tree, every flowing river, every animal carries profound lessons written in the patterns of survival, balance, and renewal. If we were placed here intentionally, maybe the planet itself represents part of the overall design, a living textbook filled with instructions meant for us to read and understand. Consider the endless cycles of life that surround us. Nothing in nature gets wasted permanently. When a leaf falls to the ground, it decomposes and becomes rich soil that nourishes the next generation. When an animal dies, its body feeds the earth, giving life to plants and insects. Water evaporates into clouds, falls as rain, and begins the cycle anew. Everywhere we look carefully, the lesson remains consistent. Endings aren't really endings at all. They're transitions, transformations into something new. Maybe we were placed here to learn that survival, growth, and renewal all represent different aspects of the same fundamental rhythm. Then there's the profound lesson of cooperation. In a forest, trees don't merely compete for sunlight, they also share essential resources underground through intricate networks of fungi. Scientists call it the wood wide web. Nutrients flow from stronger trees to weaker ones, ensuring the entire forest ecosystem survives and thrives. Ants work together in colonies, bees in hives, wolves in coordinated packs. Life flourishes in systems of cooperation, just as much as competition. If we were meant to learn from natural patterns, one crucial lesson might be that survival isn't only about individual strength, but about connection, about giving and receiving mutual support. Adaptation represents another fundamental lesson. Species change, shift, and evolve to fit their environments perfectly. Birds develop different beak shapes depending on their food sources. Insects camouflage themselves to blend seamlessly into surroundings. Even bacteria adjust their biology to resist antibiotics. Adaptability serves as the key to long-term resilience. Humanity, with our rapid intelligence development, sometimes forgets this essential truth. We try to bend the world to our will instead of learning to bend with it. But perhaps the lesson written throughout nature is that true survival means achieving balance, maintaining flexibility, and approaching change with humility. Observe predators and prey relationships. They seem brutal on the surface, but even here, natural balance exists. Predators keep population numbers in check, preventing destructive overgrowth. Prey species evolve defensive strategies, pushing predators to adapt in turn. The system remains dynamic, constantly adjusting and readjusting. In contrast, when humans remove predators from ecosystems, the balance collapses catastrophically. Deer overgraze forests, rabbits strip fields bare, pest populations multiply unchecked. Maybe the lesson is that harmony requires creative tension, that life sustains itself not by eliminating all danger, but by balancing opposing forces skillfully. Seasonal patterns carry their own profound lessons. Spring represents birth and new beginnings. Summer embodies growth and abundance. Autumn brings harvest and completion. Winter offers rest and renewal. Every culture throughout history has marked these natural rhythms, creating rituals around planting and harvesting, light and darkness cycles. The earth turns predictably, bringing with it the constant reminder that life moves in cycles rather than straight lines. Progress isn't always forward movement. Sometimes it's circular, a return, a renewal, a fresh start. Perhaps that's why so many myths about placement speak of cycles, of destruction followed by rebirth, of floods clearing the way for new beginnings. The ocean teaches us infinite patience. Tides rise and fall with the moon's gravitational pull, steady and endless, never hurried. Rivers carve magnificent canyons over millions of years, drop by single drop. Mountains rise majestically and crumble gradually on timescales far beyond human lifetimes. If we were placed here to learn essential lessons, maybe one of the most important is that time operates on vast scales and our individual perspective remains quite small. Rushing, forcing and consuming relentlessly may blind us to the deeper rhythms that carry all life forward sustainably. Even the smallest details can serve as profound teachers. A spider weaving its intricate web demonstrates persistence and precision. If the web breaks, the spider rebuilds without complaint or hesitation. A tiny seed pushes upward through dense soil, fragile but determined, drawn by sunlight it cannot yet see. Flocks of birds turn in perfect unison, each individual aware of the others, moving as one coordinated organism. Everywhere around us, lessons about resilience, persistence, and unity unfold in plain sight for those willing to observe carefully. Some philosophers suggest that if we were placed here intentionally, Earth itself may constitute our primary curriculum. The planet serves not just as our home, but as our teacher. Forests teach balance and interconnection. Rivers teach flow and persistence. Storms teach power and renewal. Deserts teach endurance and adaptation. Each environment shapes the people who live within it, offering wisdom alongside challenge. Many indigenous traditions echo this understanding perfectly. Elders speak of listening to the land, of animals as teachers, of seasons as guides for living. Knowledge exists not only in books and schools, but in patient observation, respectful attention, and reverence for the natural world. In these traditional perspectives, humanity isn't separate from nature, but intimately part of it, placed within it to learn humility, gratitude, and responsibility. Modern science, in its own way, supports this ancient wisdom. Ecology demonstrates that everything connects to everything else. Removing one species can collapse an entire ecosystem. Protecting one habitat can save countless forms of life. The lesson is interdependence, the reminder that we aren't isolated individuals but woven into the same web as everything else. Sometimes nature's lessons come as warnings. When we take more than natural systems can replenish, those systems push back with consequences. Soil erodes, climates shift dramatically, species vanish forever. Imbalance brings inevitable consequences. Perhaps that too is part of the overall design, a way of teaching limits, urging us to recognize that our intelligence must be balanced with restraint and wisdom. If we imagine that someone placed us here intentionally, then it's tempting to think they left instructions not in written words, but embedded in nature itself, living lessons about cooperation, balance, cycles, patience, and humility. Not rigid commandments, but dynamic examples, living reminders woven into the very fabric of the planet. And perhaps the greatest lesson is that we are students who must choose whether to learn. Animals follow instinct automatically, but humans have conscious choice. We can ignore the lessons completely, exploit the world ruthlessly, and rush toward collapse, or we can pay attention, adapt wisely, and live in sustainable harmony. The fact that we have this choice may itself represent the ultimate test. The irony is that in becoming too smart too soon, we often overlook the simple wisdom already surrounding us. We search the skies desperately for answers while forgetting that many answers may be written in the ground beneath our feet. If we were placed here intentionally, maybe it wasn't only to look upward toward the stars, but also to look around carefully at what's already here. And as we continue asking why we exist, nature remains steady and patient, whispering the same lessons it always has: growth, balance, renewal, connection. Perhaps those gentle whispers represent the true purpose of our placement, waiting patiently for us to finally hear them clearly. Religious traditions represent one of humanity's oldest and most direct approaches to this cosmic search. Temples, shrines, and sacred texts all constitute attempts to establish connection with whatever forces might have created or shaped our existence. Whether we identify them as gods, spirits, or ancestral beings, the underlying impulse remains identical. We desperately want to understand where we originated, why we exist, and who, if anyone, bears responsibility for our presence here. For believers across all faiths, prayer, ritual, and devoted worship serve as methods for reaching toward our makers, hoping to comprehend their ultimate intentions and purposes. Mythological traditions also embody this eternal search. Stories featuring sky beings, cosmic parents, and divine architects appear throughout virtually every human culture. While they may differ significantly in specific details, they consistently share the same fundamental theme: humanity isn't self-created. We represent the product of something far greater than ourselves. The stories we preserve and retell constitute our collective attempt to remember our true origins. In contemporary times, scientific inquiry has evolved into its own distinctive form of searching for our creators. Telescopes systematically scan the heavens for planets, artificial signals and structures that might reveal intelligence beyond Earth's boundaries. Microscopes probe deeply into DNA sequences, unraveling the genetic code that determines who we are biologically. Particle accelerators examine the fundamental building blocks of matter, hoping to discover the basic rules governing all creation. Though the technical language differs dramatically, the underlying motivation remains remarkably familiar. We're attempting to trace the pathway backward through time to locate the gardeners, designers, or natural processes that placed us in this cosmic location. One of science's most ambitious searching efforts is SETI, the organized search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Radio telescopes continuously listen for signals emanating from distant stars, scanning electromagnetic frequencies for anything appearing intentional rather than randomly generated. So far, the results have remained largely silent, except for mysterious anomalies like the famous WOW signal detected decades ago. But the search continues relentlessly, driven by the tantalizing possibility that someone out there might be actively transmitting, patiently waiting to be discovered by emerging civilizations like ourselves. If we were indeed placed here by extraterrestrial visitors, perhaps they left behind beacons, communication signals, or technological artifacts, and we simply haven't developed sufficient capability to detect them yet. Space exploration represents another form of active searching for our origins. Robotic probes dispatched to Mars, Europa, Enceladus, and beyond are systematically hunting for signs of life throughout our solar system. Not because discovering microbes on distant worlds would answer every fundamental question, but because such findings would definitively prove that life isn't unique to Earth alone. If biological existence thrives elsewhere, then intentional placement transforms from wild speculation into genuine likelihood. Our potential makers might not be observing us from great distances. They could be scattered throughout the galaxy, systematically planting seeds of life wherever suitable conditions allow. Then there's the inward search, our attempt to find evidence of our creators embedded within ourselves. Genetic research occasionally reveals puzzling anomalies like viral insertions or accelerated evolutionary regions that make scientists wonder whether our DNA carries deliberate signatures of external design. Consciousness studies wrestle with the profound mystery of awareness itself, questioning whether it represents a natural byproduct of complex brain chemistry or provides clues to something far deeper and more significant. Philosophers debate whether the universe itself possesses consciousness and whether we constitute fragments of that larger cosmic mind. In each approach, the search focuses not on external discovery, but internal investigation within the very fabric of human nature and experience. Some scientists have even seriously entertained the possibility that we exist inside an elaborate computer simulation. If this theory proved accurate, then our makers wouldn't be biological entities at all, but advanced programmers and designers of a reality we experience without recognizing its artificial nature. The simulation hypothesis remains highly speculative, but it captures the same fundamental longing for connection. If we exist within a constructed system, then somewhere outside that system dwell those who built it. Discovering them would represent the ultimate revelation of our true creators. This search also carries tremendous emotional weight that extends far beyond mere intellectual curiosity. It represents genuine yearning for connection and understanding. Children naturally ask about their parents, wanting to know who gave them life and where they originally came from. Humanity functions like a child asking identical questions on a cosmic scale: who gave us life, who shaped our development, who placed us in this specific location. Like children seeking answers about their origins, we may not always appreciate what we discover. If our makers prove benevolent, we might feel chosen, carefully protected, and meaningfully connected to something greater than ourselves. If they remain indifferent to our welfare, we could feel abandoned, like orphans adrift in an uncaring universe. If they prove hostile or purely self-interested, we might feel exploited and used. The search carries genuine risks of disappointment, but also holds the extraordinary possibility of discovering profound meaning and purpose. Historical evidence demonstrates how remarkably persistent this search has remained throughout human civilization. From ancient astronomers carefully tracking stellar movements to philosophers debating the essential nature of the soul to contemporary scientists decoding the human genome, this fundamental question has never disappeared. Every generation reformulates it using new vocabulary and innovative approaches. Perhaps that persistent drive itself provides an important clue. Maybe we were specifically designed to search continuously, never stopping our questions and investigations. Perhaps the act of searching represents an integral part of our placement, a built-in psychological drive to reach constantly beyond our immediate circumstances. If we were truly placed here intentionally, Our makers may have left behind discoverable signs. They might be hidden within mythological traditions, encoded in genetic sequences, carved into ancient stone monuments, or waiting patiently among distant stars. Or perhaps the signs prove more subtle, found not in physical artifacts, but embedded within the very structure of reality itself. The fine-tuned constants of physics, the statistical improbability of life, the uniqueness of human consciousness, all could be interpreted as breadcrumbs leading us back to the source. Maybe our makers deliberately choose to remain hidden from direct observation. Perhaps the point isn't to find them directly, but to grow and develop through the act of continuous searching. Like wise teachers who step back to allow students to solve problems independently, the makers may intentionally withhold clear answers, so we learn to create meaning and purpose for ourselves. But the search will undoubtedly continue, because even if we never discover definitive proof, the act of looking fundamentally shapes who we become. It drives scientific research, philosophical inquiry, religious devotion, and artistic expression. It transforms us into explorers, not merely of the physical world, but of existence itself. Perhaps that represents the true purpose of our eternal search, not necessarily to find our makers, but to become increasingly aware of ourselves and our place in the cosmos. For most of recorded history, people naturally assumed we weren't alone in the universe. The stars served as homes for gods, spirits, or ancestral beings. The sky remained alive with invisible watchers and divine observers. Only during the modern scientific era did we begin seriously considering the possibility that maybe, just maybe, we exist in complete isolation throughout the cosmos. It's a genuinely sobering thought. Billions upon billions of stars, countless planetary systems, and yet perhaps only one world harboring life. But what if this assumption proves completely wrong? What if we're definitely not alone? What would such a discovery mean for us, for our species' story, and for the central question of whether we were placed here intentionally? The first implication would be simple, yet absolutely profound. If we're not alone, then life isn't unique to Earth. It wouldn't represent a miracle confined to a single planet, but rather a fundamental pattern woven throughout the universe itself. That realization would change absolutely everything about our perspective. It would mean life isn't fragile or extraordinarily rare, but widespread and resilient. It would mean the cosmos isn't empty and sterile, but filled with thriving gardens of biological activity. The concept of being placed here would become far less extraordinary if we discovered others were placed elsewhere throughout the galaxy. We would become part of a vast family of life, not the solitary child of creation. If we discovered even the simplest microbes on another world, it would prove sufficient to establish this revolutionary point. The universe would no longer appear silent and lifeless. It would be demonstrably alive in multiple locations. That single discovery alone would fundamentally transform our perspective. We would understand that Earth isn't the cosmic center, but rather one node within an immense network of biological existence. But if we discovered genuinely intelligent life elsewhere, the implications would prove even more staggering. Suddenly, we would have companions in the profound questions we've been asking throughout history. We would know definitively that consciousness, advanced technology, and complex civilization aren't unique to human experience. It would demonstrate that intelligence itself isn't an evolutionary accident, but perhaps an inevitable outcome when life reaches sufficient complexity. Yet the thought also brings unsettling possibilities. What if these other intelligences have advanced far beyond us technologically or morally? What if they perceive us as children, experimental subjects, or valuable resources? What if they were the ones who originally placed us here? The comforting realization that we're not alone would bring reassurance, but it would also introduce profound vulnerability. We would no longer occupy the top of the intelligence hierarchy. We would be participants in something vastly larger, without knowing exactly where we stand within that cosmic order. Imagine the day we receive a clear signal, an unmistakable message from another civilization. Even if it contained nothing more than a simple greeting, it would send ripples through every human culture, every religious tradition, every philosophical system. Some would interpret it as proof of divine intervention, others as evidence against traditional theology. Some would fear invasion, others would celebrate the end of cosmic loneliness. Governments would scramble to respond, scientists would rejoice, and ordinary people everywhere would gaze upward at the stars with completely transformed eyes. Human civilization would never remain the same after such a discovery. If we're not alone, it might also fundamentally reframe our understanding of human purpose. Perhaps we aren't the primary experiment, but rather participants in a much larger project. Maybe civilizations scattered across the galaxy function like individual pieces of an enormous puzzle, each contributing something uniquely valuable. Perhaps the cosmic gardeners, whoever they might be, deliberately seek diversity, creativity, and variety among their planted species. Maybe our specific role involves contributing our distinctive art, our unique stories, our particular form of consciousness to a greater cosmic whole. On the other hand, if we're not alone, it could introduce the element of competition between species. Civilizations might compete for scarce resources, territorial control, or basic survival. The test of civilization we already face here on Earth might extend outward into interstellar space. Will we encounter others with cooperation or conflict? Will we choose to share resources and knowledge, or will we fight for dominance? Some scientists discuss the concept of the Great Filter, the idea that somewhere in the standard development of life, there exists a barrier most species cannot successfully overcome. Perhaps intelligence inevitably leads to self-destruction before it can spread beyond its home planet. If this theory proves accurate, then meeting other successful civilizations would demonstrate that we're not doomed to eventual isolation. It would prove that others have passed the test successfully, and perhaps we can achieve the same positive outcome. But what if we're not just not alone, but actively connected to our cosmic family? What if those who originally placed us here continue observing our development from afar? What if the ancient myths describing gods descending from the sky weren't products of imagination, but preserved cultural memories of actual events? What if our long search for our makers eventually culminates in direct contact? In that case, the meaning would prove far more direct and immediate. It would confirm that our story isn't exclusively our own, but represents part of a much larger cosmic design and purpose. Throughout history, people have responded to the possibility of other intelligences with both wonder and fear. Mythological traditions describe sky beings bringing essential knowledge, but also delivering punishment for transgression. Science fiction explores extraterrestrials who either uplift humanity toward greater achievements or threaten to destroy us completely. These stories reflect our fundamental uncertainty about what discovery would actually mean. We simply don't know whether learning we're not alone would bring salvation or danger. Still, the ultimate meaning may depend less on them and more on how we choose to respond. If we discover we're definitely not alone, how will humanity react? Will we shrink back in fear and defensiveness? Or will we grow in understanding and wisdom? Will we define ourselves through fearful comparison? Or will we recognize ourselves as part of something infinitely greater? Some argue that even if intelligent life exists throughout the galaxy, the vast distances between star systems make meaningful contact extremely unlikely. We may never actually meet them face to face, but even knowing definitively that they exist would prove sufficient. It would shift our fundamental perspective from cosmic isolation to universal connection. It would help us see Earth not as the only home of life, but as one precious world among countless many. Maybe that represents the essential lesson. If we're not alone, then placement becomes less of an unsolvable mystery and more of a recognizable pattern. Perhaps numerous civilizations were placed deliberately throughout the cosmos, each carrying their own profound questions about existence. Perhaps the real story isn't about being uniquely special, but about being part of an immense network of life, all wondering, all searching, all trying to understand why they're here. The meaning of not being alone stretches in every possible direction. It could bring comfort, fear, purpose, competition, or deep connection. It could fundamentally transform religion, science, philosophy, and daily life throughout human civilization. It could completely redefine what it fundamentally means to be human. But regardless of whether we exist in cosmic isolation or among countless civilizations, the very act of asking these questions transforms us. Perhaps that represents what matters most of all. Sometimes, after exploring all the questions and entertaining all the speculation, it feels appropriate to simply pause, breathe deeply, allow our thoughts to settle, and accept that mystery itself forms an essential part of what makes existence truly meaningful. We have journeyed through concepts of cosmic gardeners, extraterrestrial visitors, time-traveling future humans, ancient myths, and mysterious monuments. We have examined genetics, consciousness, and civilization itself in our search for answers. But there arrives a point when the search stops being about finding definitive answers. It transforms into learning how to live peacefully with the profound wonder of not knowing everything. Mystery has always been an integral part of human experience throughout history. Ancient peoples gazed upward at the stars and felt the same overwhelming awe we experience today. They wondered what existed out there, who might be observing them, why the heavens appeared so vast yet seemed so intimately connected to their earthly lives. They created stories, constructed monuments and preserved traditions not because they possessed clear answers, but because they wanted to live in meaningful relationship with the unknown. Mystery wasn't an obstacle to overcome. It was simply part of existence itself. In our contemporary era, scientific advancement has illuminated much that was once completely hidden from understanding. We know the precise distances to stars, the age of the universe, the intricate structure of DNA. We can model climate patterns, split atoms, and use telescopes to peer billions of years into the cosmic past. Yet even as our knowledge expands dramatically, the underlying mystery only deepens. The more we learn, the more new questions emerge. Why does the universe appear fine-tuned for life? Why does consciousness exist at all? Why is there something rather than nothing? If we were indeed placed here intentionally, those persistent mysteries may be part of the placement itself. Perhaps we were never meant to possess all the answers. Perhaps the questions themselves represent the real gift, the genuine test of our humanity, to wonder, to search endlessly, to imagine possibilities. These capacities define what makes us uniquely human. Resting comfortably with mystery doesn't mean abandoning our quest for understanding. It means recognizing that not everything requires immediate solution. It means allowing ourselves to live peacefully inside questions without rushing toward premature conclusions. It means permitting the unknown to become a companion rather than a threat. There exists genuine peace in this approach to life's mysteries. Think of sitting quietly beside a flowing river. You don't demand to know where every individual drop originated, or where every drop will eventually travel. You simply listen attentively, observe carefully, and allow it to flow naturally. Mystery can function like that river. It moves around us, through us, beyond us, and we can rest peacefully with it, understanding that we're part of its eternal flow. Throughout history, some of humanity's greatest wisdom has emerged not from definitive answers, but from quiet, patient reflection. Philosophers sat thoughtfully under trees. Mystics meditated in secluded caves. Scientists spent countless hours staring at the night sky, simply watching and absorbing. In those contemplative moments, they weren't forcing answers to appear. They were listening carefully to mystery itself, allowing it to speak in its own natural way. In daily life, mystery surrounds us everywhere. We don't fully understand why love creates the sensations it does, why music can move us to tears, why a beautiful sunset can make us pause and feel something beyond words. These are mysteries we live with comfortably, not because we understand them completely, but because they make life incredibly rich and meaningful. Perhaps our placement here follows the same pattern. Not something to solve definitively, but something to experience fully. Sometimes people fear mystery, as though not knowing indicates weakness or failure, but maybe embracing uncertainty demonstrates genuine strength. To admit that we don't know everything, to welcome that uncertainty, means remaining open to new possibilities. Closed answers end conversations. Mystery keeps them vibrantly alive. If you imagine that someone did place us here deliberately, perhaps this was always their intention, not to provide us with a world containing clear instructions, but to gift us a world overflowing with puzzles, beauty and wonder, a world that continually asks us to search, imagine, and find peaceful rest within the questions. There's deep comfort in recognizing that mystery isn't the absence of meaning, but rather its profound presence. Mystery invites us to keep looking, learning, and sharing discoveries with others. It keeps us humble, reminding us that we remain small, yet capable of asking enormous questions. It connects us meaningfully to previous generations, who wondered about identical things, and to future generations who will continue wondering still. As we exist here now in this precise moment, it's worth pausing to notice how genuinely extraordinary it is that we can reflect on our existence at all. Billions of years of cosmic history, countless accidents and adaptations, and here we are aware, listening, questioning everything. Maybe that represents the deepest mystery of all. So let's allow ourselves this moment to rest peacefully with uncertainty. Not to solve every puzzle, not to prove every theory, not to conclude every argument, but simply to be present. To recognize that mystery forms part of being human, part of being placed here, part of the magnificent story we carry forward. And maybe, just maybe, that recognition is enough.